Nobody that I know of in my field uses the so-called scientific method. In our field, it's by the seat of your pants. It's leaps of logic. It's guesswork.
Don't see the curvature of the earth. That stuff is flat.
GLOBEBUSTERS taking over. Bye bye moon man and rover. NASA's so mediocre. Sorry, but your ball is dead. But your ball is GLOBEBUSTERs taking over. Gotta ride this roller coaster, but the truth is getting closer. Sorry, but your ball is dead. But your ball is. Get the shovel for the space hubble. Piecing up the puzzle. Need a burst your bubble. Evil gonna crumble, yeah. Sit down, be humble. Got the ball, you bout to fumble. You'll get mad cause at this fight I'm about your uncle.
And then they call me the liar. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable the pathetic techniques that they have to use to prove their heliocentric model.
Bob shot the president, Jeran got the evidence. Arrow slaying Jesuits and Zack is evident. Dead to earth electric and it's residential residence. It's evidence and I hope to settle in like some sediment. If we so wrong, why they lying to discredit it? That's not too intelligent. That's a guy, not an in court, but we ain't really in the settlement. It's time to awaken from the pseudoscience sedatives.
GLOBEBUSTERs taking over. Bye bye moon man and rover. NASA's so mediocre. Sorry, but your ball is dead. But your ball is. GLOBEBUSTERs taking over. Gotta ride this roller coaster, but the truth is getting closer. Sorry, but your ball is dead. But your ball is.
Inner World Productions.
And welcome to GLOBEBUSTERS. All right, we got everyone up on here. So we got season 12, episode 4, proofs of the heliocentric globe model debunked, and should be a good show. So we'll go ahead and introduce everyone. Let's start with Iru. What's going on, bro?
Hello, Jen, Asti. How you doing, man? Yeah, no, well, my mind is pre-programmed as Jeran as a host, things like that, and I cannot fight with that. But nice to be here and share information with the audience.
Yeah, man. Good to have you on here. And we got my boy Jeran from Jeranism. What's going on, brother?
Oh, I'm just excited we have the whole crew here. It's a rarity.
Yeah, man. Nostalgic.
Doing well. Thank you.
And we got Zack from Good Times for All. What's going on, man?
Austin, hey fellas, how's it going?
Good. How about yourself?
Yeah, can't complain, man. It's finally starting to cool off a little bit around here. So we're finally hitting that fall. The leaves are starting to change. I was up north last week, well, 2 weeks ago, and it was already beautiful up there. I mean, just all the different colors that you see, the yellows and reds and browns, and I don't get to see that down here nearly as much. But at least it doesn't snow. That's all I can say.
Yeah, we're about to hit like the amazing period in Florida, so.
Yeah, it's the only time I've ever really spent in Florida was during their winter, which was beautiful. It was like 75 to 80 something degrees every day. With it only rained like I was there maybe 2 months, and it rained like twice. It was just awesome.
All right, we are also on X, so we're on Rumble, Rockfin X, and YouTube. We also have the Telegram Uncensored Chat, so t.me/GLOBEBUSTERS. You can go to the live stream Uncensored Chat. I'll be checking that. And if you want to support the stream, we are on Ko-fi.com/GLOBEBUSTERS, pinned in the chat. And if you're on X, try to go over there and repost it for us because the GLOBEBUSTERS X account is currently pretty small. I did just quote it, so hopefully we get some engagement there. All right, cool. Well, yeah, it's been a while since we've all been together. Pretty cool. I think we've taken a bit of a break. Are you guys all ready for Trump to come save the world?
Oh man.
I don't know about all that, but yeah, I mean, to me,
Of
this is
course.
all a show, and it looks like that's what they're definitely projecting is that Trump is going to walk away with this one pretty much well victorious. That's just
Or
what,
they make it super obvious that he should win or supposedly did win, then he landslides and
and
they
then
pause
take
it and
it.
they steal it.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I am from outside United States, so I want blood running on streets, and I want show. I want good popcorns
Half the
and
country to
how
die. Thank you.
yeah,
Oh,
how
you just
you
you
walk.
want civil
mean-
unrest?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, but he was on the podcast of Joe Rogan today or yesterday. I
Yeah,
think.
cool.
Yeah, 30 million views, 25 million views.
It's
Crazy.
actually pretty good interview.
Yeah. I didn't have the time to see it, but like I mentioned before, I am from Argentina, so we are so bad in terms of the economics and politics, so nobody can rescue. Nobody can,
Yeah.
even Donald Trump.
Yeah, man. Screw that. So, all right, cool, man. So the idea of today's show, and we can go wherever. I think a couple other people on the panel have some things they might want to bring up, but it's the quote unquote proofs of the heliocentric globe model debunked. And that sounds like, I guess, this bold statement. I think when I quoted it, I put objectively because all the alleged proofs that we're told about this model aren't true. They're like lies. And, talk about why would they lie? So it's very interesting. I figured we'd cover some of those things because flat Earth is about to kind of explode again, for sure. Like guaranteed, in my opinion. And obviously, what people do when they first hear it is Google, proof of the heliocentric model, proof of the globe model. So I figured we'd go through some of that. And if at any point in time you guys want to bring something else up or whatever, just let me know.
Yeah, I still remember the old days when we have in our favor the algorithmics and the recommendation of Google and YouTube. That was so nice, man. You enter in Google Trends and check flat Earth, and you could see the statistics and the graphic with the spike as Al Gore when he trying to convince the world that the climate change was real, and he put in the big screen the spike of the graphics. But we used to have that thing in our favor, and I think when I take a look, and if you start trying to find something about flat Earth, not the heliocentric model but the flat Earth, that was a battle that we win, because we was the first community that produced a change in the algorithmics of the social networks. That never happened. Maybe with the 9/11 thing, or maybe some tiny topic out there, but they never change because you trying to find things about aliens or Masons or Jesuits or things like that. And then of course the pandemic comes and they change things about health. But that is my interpretation, of course, but we share the world. How bad when you're trying to fight the systems using their own tools, how things came out.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. And like now you can kind of go to Yandex and still get a bit of that same type of like legitimate search results. It's pretty wild. Yandex is incredible. I don't know if you guys use it, but yandex.com. And I'm talking
Yeah,
like
it's a Russian search engine, right?
Yep. Good, man. So cool. So here, I'll go ahead and share the screen. But so I just typed in Google proofs of heliocentrism. And I have this thing called Search Labs AI Overview, which I do find to be very useful, certainly when I'm trying to kind of get a quick summary of the official position. And it provides the supportive links. And here's what it lists. It says Galileo's observations in 1610. He used his telescope to observe that Jupiter had moons orbiting it, that Venus went through phases. These observations proved that the planets orbit the sun, not the Earth, as predicted by the heliocentric model. And it says Kepler's laws, German mathematician Kepler published a series of laws that accurately predict the planets' orbits around the sun. You have the orbits of Mercury and Venus. The heliocentric model placed the orbits of Mercury and Venus between the sun and Earth, which explains why they appear to change size and shape over time, and on and on. You have here, it tells you that Copernicus, of course, launched the scientific revolution. Now, of course, it wasn't science, it was philosophical. Copernicus literally deified the sun. Kepler said that the sun had, properties of a deity as well, and it was basically singing a heavenly song, and that everything was, moving based on this heavenly song and the vibrations within, etc. Something else that I do want to point out here is heliocentrism, also known as the heliocentric model, is a superseded astronomical model in which the Earth and planets revolve around the sun at the center of the universe. Historically, heliocentrism was opposed to geocentrism, which placed the Earth at the center. And so technically, they now say that we have a solar barycentric system. There is no true center to the universe, etc. So we're going to use the term heliocentrism for intents and purposes, but technically, it's actually outdated. So I guess that's maybe one of the points I'll make at the beginning. This whole idea that, because what we always hear with both, heliocentrism and the globe is, people proved this thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago. We've known for hundreds of years. Da, da, da. If we go back to when, say, heliocentrism was proposed, they literally thought the Earth went around the sun because the sun was in the center of the entire universe. And they were obviously not correct. Even within the current model, the paradigm of the current model, that isn't true. So this is what I find so interesting, though. When we look at these lists here, and then we have another one that we'll go through, which is proof the Earth is a globe, and you have all your points there. So all of the proofs provided for both aren't actually proofs. They're not exclusive at all. And that should make you wonder. Now, this is the same thing you'll find out about relativity. The most scientifically verified, tested, and verified theory ever. And here are the proofs of relativity. And they'll tell you time dilation. You can't use GPS without the relativistic correction of time dilation for the atomic clocks. Lie. Right? They actually, the first time that they tested this, Halfling and Keating, they found out it didn't match the relativistic prediction at all. You can go look at their own chart from their paper they wrote as the results of the test. And it shows that it was going up and down, so positive and negative in both directions at all different altitudes. It didn't match the predictions at all. But that is actually, we're told, and you can Google it, it'll tell you that that's proof of relativity. Same thing with the 1919 Arthur Eddington experiment. They claim relativity predicted that you would see a star from behind an eclipse, and that was because of gravitational lensing, and so that would verify relativity. And they said that, they saw it, they proved it, it verified relativity, but what actually happened was there were like 30-something plates, none of them, but a couple even, allegedly showed the relativistic prediction, and the ones that supposedly did conveniently disappeared and were destroyed, and there's no evidence of them. And then, Eddington himself wrote a letter and said, this is a major problem for relativity because most of our photographic plates are not seeing the observation. You can go a step further. That wouldn't prove it anyway, of course. That causation doesn't equal or correlation doesn't equal causation. You can't just look in the sky and see a star and be like, oh, well, that must mean space and time bend. So that's just a couple really quick examples. Another one is that you have the whole idea that the retrograde, the perihelion shift of Mercury was predicted by relativity. People say this all the time. That's just laughably stupid. It was observed decades before relativity was even a thing. And then they'll move the goalposts and say, oh, well, relativity works to predict it, or it can explain it, and it proves relativity is correct. Not true either. It's a little bit closer than Newtonian gravity, but it still doesn't work. No one to this day has figured out how to make it work, except for just kind of making up ideas, stuff like that. So because this isn't going to be too focused on relativity specifically, I'll just use that as an example. Logically, you should think, wait, if this model's true and there's supposedly evidences and proofs of it, how come all the top ones, like their home runs that they provide to you in the mainstream, are all deceptive? Why are they all lies?
Yeah, I mean, think about just the idea of boats going over the curve. I mean, it's just a blatant fabrication because you can go out today, you can go to the beach, you can use your eyes, you watch the boats till it disappears from your eye, and then you bring out your camera or telescope and you'll pull it back. Now, Globers have taken that and they think that we mean that forever that will work and they never actually disappear into the horizon or anything like that, which we don't mean. But what we're simply pointing out is that if with our eyes we see boats disappear and then we bring them back with telescopes or cameras, then that debunks the idea that these guys in 250 BC or in 70 AD or anytime before there was optics like cameras and telescopes, they would have seen what we saw, which is boats disappear with their eyes. And therefore, if they called that proof that the earth curves, well, now we've proven that's wrong. So another one that they use as one of their main arguments, and it's just fallacious. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, like every single part of the story of how the globe was proven is like that. Where they say Aristotle looked at the moon and like, oh man, the moon looks like a sphere, the earth must be one. That's stupid. That your chart doesn't prove anything, obviously. You know, and then they say the same thing about the boat, but they didn't have, the optics to bring it back, like you brought up. And they bring up Eratosthenes, which according to the official story, you need more than two to even claim exclusivity, which we know that actually isn't true anyway. You can replicate dozens of them on a flat surface, assume a sphere, make the math say, okay, here's the circumference of this flat table, right? And there are many different things based on the way that the light from the sun comes to us. But the point is that the official story is they only had two shadows. So even according to the official story, it wouldn't have proven the globe, right? So
Right.
it's weird. It's weird. It's almost like they want to get people to where they believe something that is illogical and patently wrong, so that you're truly devoted. I'm so confused by it.
Yeah, you're like confused so much that you have to believe it because you know you're not smart enough to figure it out. If these super smart guys can't figure it out, then why would you even try?
Yeah,
They
just
just have
also wild, right? I mean, I guess option A is like this super calculated method of brainwashing, where if you get someone to deny their own senses or just willingly choose to believe something that's easily debunked, then they're much more effectively brainwashed. And then there's this other very simple aspect that's like, well, if what you're saying isn't true, really the best you're going to be able to come up with is things that aren't true to supposedly prove it. And, it may be a combination of the two. I don't know, but it's very weird. So if we look out here, let's start with this idea here of Kepler's laws. This is like the number one that we get, right? It's the idea that, well, we know that the Earth moves around the sun because we can map out all the planets. And that's what Kepler did, and that's called kinematics. And I've tried many different ways to explain this as simply as I can. Kinematics and dynamics, it seems to really confuse people, and even when you talk to, like, PhD astrophysicists and astronomers, they conflate the two all the time. Like, I was talking to an aerospace engineer that works at NASA the other day, the difference between the two completely eluded him, and same with PhD astronomer Robert Parks when he talked to Robert Bennett on my channel a little bit ago. Almost every time you talk to PhDs, they seem to not know the difference, and it's because the whole notion or belief of this model kinda depends upon you conflating the two. It's very interesting. And so, really simply, I've said this a million times probably, but kinematics are how bodies move in relation to each other. Austin walks around the pole. Austin moves his finger around the mic. Whatever it is. It's in a circle around. And you could geometrically describe it. You can measure it. You can measure motion. It's about moving variables, but it's just basically taking notes of what is seen in terms of how things move, right? So that's called kinematics. How bodies move in relation to each other has nothing to do with forces, has nothing to do with why or how the thing is moving. It's just describing that it moves. Okay. And then dynamics is the very thing that kinematics doesn't do. It tries to explain the reason why, the cause of it, the force that causes the movement. Very different things. So Kepler's laws are just kinematics. They're just geometry. It's literally just mapping out the way that the planets appear to move from the Earth. And it uses radii and periodicity. So, really simply, all the planets have cycles. They periodically go through cycles. That's periodicity. And then you have the radii in relation to other planets, which is just multiple, the plural of radius, right? It's literally just based on the proximity and the cyclical pattern. That's all it is. And we discovered that if you're able to, there's this reoccurring relationship between them all, and Kepler's laws works to describe that geometry. Okay, so and even in the mainstream model right now of the heliocentric globe, that would work exactly the same if the Earth were in the center, not moving. So why would Kepler's laws be on this list? Why would Kepler's laws be on these mainstream articles claiming to prove it, right? Like here we go, Kepler and Newton right here. Like why? Because it's objectively not the case, right? And so I hope everyone understands that. It's really simple. Everyone understands the idea of relative motion. And what they now say is there is no center. Wherever you're at, it's going to look like you're in the center. And to quote Einstein, for like the gazillionth time, right? The struggle so violent in the days of Copernicus, between Copernicus and Ptolemy, which is obviously heliocentrism and geocentrism, was quite meaningless. It's just based on a coordinate system. And the two statements, the sun moves around the Earth and the Earth is still, or the sun is at rest and the Earth moves around the sun, are equally valid. They mean the same thing. It's just a coordinate system preference. Okay, so that's the current. So long story short, when we see these things that people refer to as planets moving around, whether that be retrograde or the regular perceived orbits or anything, it doesn't prove anything. And let me actually step back. This is the reason I want to do this stream. Like, let's just introduce this conversation with logic. Let's reset everything that we've been told, and let's just think logically, right? The claim is that the Earth is a specific thing. That it's just we were told the Earth's a specific thing. So that has the burden of proof. We were told that it's a sphere that's tilted and it's wobbling a few different ways while it's spinning, and then it's orbiting the sun and many other things, and that it's flying through the galaxy, and that the galaxy is flying through the universe. That's the positive claim. So when we type in proofs of heliocentrism or quote unquote proofs of heliocentric globe model debunked, well, that's because it has the burden of proof, which is very simple. So let's just examine these alleged proofs. There should be a lot of them. If it's so laughable to even dare question it, which is the narrative that we're told. Just to make sure we get that, because what I found is that part of it is like the biggest hiccup. It's like people refuse to be honest enough to accept what I just said. They say, no, you have the burden of proof. Or they want to ask, oh, well, then how does it work? How does this work? Well, then can you answer this? And like, none of that makes, it's all illogical. It's like, bro, there should be plenty of proof that the heliocentric model is true. If it's true, it's a claim. And then I brought that up to tie this into this idea. So I don't want to just like kind of ramble this whole stream or anything, but when I was explaining the Kepler's laws thing, it's like if we think about this very simply, when you say, hey, do you have any exclusive evidence that the Earth moves around the sun? Do you have any proof of the heliocentric model? What they will say is something like the Kepler's laws or the movement of planets. So what you're saying is the proof that Earth is moving through space is that we see other things moving in the sky. How does that make there's no way you don't understand that that's illogical. That isn't proof. And so it's the same thing. It's like, oh, well, because we see the sun move throughout the year. It's like your proof that the Earth is moving is that the sun, we can see the sun moving, but the sun isn't actually moving. It's the Earth moving, making it look like the sun is moving. And that's proof that it's the Earth moving. What? So not only do you have the burden of proof, but like you have a strong burden of proof because on its face, your claim is retarded. Like more so it's an egregious like begging the question, and it's counterintuitive and it's antithetical to what we observe. So I hope that sometime I can figure out how to break through the wall of Cognis, but hopefully people get what I'm saying. Okay, any guys got any input? I don't want to just literally just like go through all the specifics of each and every one of these, although I'm down to, but do you guys have any take on anything I've said or anything kind of related?
I think the things that go against everything that we were taught science was should be looked at, exclusively, because we have Feynman up there saying if things don't match the theory, then you have to throw out the theory. And so they build this false idea of what science is, and then they throw dark matter and dark energy at you, and then you look into that and you're like, wait, why we have, it's because gravity doesn't work in the outer regions. And then you're like, wait, so we're basing everything off of what we say works here at the Earth, but doesn't work in the galaxy. So that's a theory that doesn't work, not a theory that works. That's a theory that does not work, and therefore it should be thrown away. But instead, they just made up placeholders and said, no, there's dark energy and dark matter. There must be there because we must be right about this. Because, imagine the Earth is literally 0.000000000 as many zeros you could put 1% of the universe, let alone of the Milky Way. It's still probably 15 zeros in there, 0.0000001%. So to imagine that we have the mental capacity to say, in this little tiny dot that we've figured out the math that works here, that it must apply everywhere, to the point where we're now going to teach this in school, that this is the truth, and we know these distances and everything, when you have to make up expansion that has no viable method. How the hell is it expanding? It must be some dark energy that we don't see. Okay, we'll count that. So it's just completely antithetical to science. That's not what we were taught science was. It's not a guesstimate and then a placeholders and then, we'll just call this because eventually we'll find it or eventually we'll see it, because you've now handicapped science almost like permanently. You've strangleholded it and you've made it stuck, and it's your own doing. Look what you did. So, there's just so many things like that Feynman says if you have a theory and it doesn't match observation, then you throw out the theory. So therefore, if we have a gravitational theory that doesn't match observation, which it does not, then you have to throw out the theory. I don't understand which one I'm supposed to believe now. Do I believe Feynman, who talks about science, or do I believe current science, which goes against that? It's just it's a conundrum that you can't really get to the bottom of. And yet they want to call it like we know what we're talking about. And again, listen to Michikaku say that we're off by 10 to the 120th, which is the largest mismatch in the history of science. Well, shouldn't that be a problem? And yet we're still laughed at for questioning the almighty heliocentric model that is off by the worst calculation in the history of science. I think that's an obvious issue. And then, going back to you talking about Eratosthenes in 275 BC, figured out the circumference, and he was so close. He's within 1%, Austin. I don't know if you knew that, but within 1% of the current total. However, 1800 years after that, Columbus thought he hit India when sailing across the Atlantic, because he thought the Earth was half as big as Eratosthenes did. So I guess maybe people didn't know what Eratosthenes did 1800 years before that. Also, why did nobody ever even try to go to America for 1800 years? Right? None of these things make any sense. And it goes even further than that when you start looking back at where they got any of these distances to start with. Because I guarantee you're not going to figure out the distance to the moon. If this Earth got hit by something and it's just you and a person left and you two are here and you're like, we need to figure out the distance to the moon, you're not going to have a clue. It's just like they wouldn't have. And the story that we're getting is like, they looked at the half moon and then they knew that there must be a 90-degree angle between the sun and the moon. So they figured they just needed to come up with their angle between them and the sun, and then they could get the distance. Well, they did that, and I don't know who it was, Aristarchus or whatever, came up with 87 degrees, and then he figured out that it was like 14 times as far as the moon. Well, the actual answer is 400 times, because the actual degree that we're to the moon or to the sun supposedly is 89 point something, not 87. But then you ask yourself the question, well, hold on, how did he measure 87 degrees? What do you mean? How can you measure your angle to the sun if you are, when? In morning, afternoon, at midday, at night? How do you even measure your angle to the sun? If you're talking about the half moon, now there's the sun over there in the sky. I have to measure my angle to it, and I'm going to get 89 point something, and Aristarchus got 87. It just doesn't even jive. Their whole stories don't make sense. The idea that we just guessed we're Venus, the size of Venus, and it so happened to be correct, is just so astronomically out of this world to even imagine. And then these whole, we found these planets due to mathematics, which you look into that, and that's not true. It's just everything falls apart. and yet we're supposed to just continue believing it. I don't get it. I don't know how you can believe stories when you can tell it's a story. The whole thing's a story. And then you start looking back now, and do you know that like the Almagest, which if you look on one end, you'll get told that's the greatest book of all time. The Almagest, it's Ptolemy wrote the greatest. But now, if you actually look it up, it's actually all contrived. Now the scholars are saying that it's completely fake. That every observation in the Almagest was fake. In fact, I believe if you look up, I know it's the guy's name is Newton on Ptolemy. I believe he wrote the book that is complete and total. In Newton's view, Ptolemy was the most successful fraud in the history of science. Newton claimed that Ptolemy had predominantly obtained astronomical results described in his work, the Almagest, by computation and not by the direct observation that Ptolemy described, which means if it was done by computation, it was done recently. It's done, it's written about the past, and it completely falls apart. Again, these are people that we're told to look up to, and look at the great book, the Almagest, the greatest book ever written, and yet we find out it's a fake. So, and these are basically all the guys in the old days were fakes. They none of them have any books. We're just supposed to believe stories told about stories about stories. That's not how history should work. You shouldn't be able to tell me what Aristophanes did in his great test when you have not one book of Aristophanes. So somebody later down the line wrote and said, "Oh well, Aristophanes did this test," and that's what we're supposed to believe. But it seems pretty weird that the book printing press didn't come out until what 1500, 1400, and then from there it seems like these lies started to be told. And so, how long is our history? Who knows? Everything is just applied to these people in the past, and it doesn't tell a good story that's easy to follow and say, "Oh, okay, this all makes sense." It just doesn't work. So I think there's so many problems with it. I don't really know where you're supposed to. And this is what happens when you have faulty foundations. How do you build a house on a faulty foundation? You try to put a brick over here, it starts to crumble and fall. Okay, well, let's go over here and build it. No, that one starts to fall. So you really just have nowhere to even build on because everything you've been told is a faulty story. So how do you put together reality around nonsense? And I worry sometimes that they just keep correcting this model. I'm wondering if they don't do resets and then they have things figured out even better the next time, and they just keep kind of telling the same story, but we're actually helping them. Every day we do the show, we're helping them to clean up the mistakes of their story for the next time. That's why.
Yeah, that's fine for me because it can't work because they've done it like
right. They keep
yeah, like it just doesn't work, right? Like for example, when you brought up Newton, well, here is Newton's Principia, Proposition 43, Theorem 22. This is the original handwritten page. This was in the original handwritten copy of Newton's Principia. It was the final page. But for some reason, it was removed prior to being published and was not removed by Newton, but rather the person who published it, which is weird, right? And what does it say? Well, it says that in order for the Earth to be at rest in the center of the system of the sun, planets, and comets, there is required both universal gravity and another force in addition that acts on all bodies equally according to the quantity of matter in each of them, and is equal and opposite to the accelerative gravity with which the Earth tends to the sun, and thus celestial bodies can move around the Earth at rest, as in the Tychonic system. Now, this is obviously, he's proposing this idea within his previously proposed idea in Principia, which is that there's this mass-dependent thing called gravity. But Newton straight up said that geocentrism was possible. Right? Like just straight up said it, and it was removed. And this goes back to the whole reason, the whole idea of this show, that this stream. It's like, why, if what they're saying is true, why is there so much deception involved? Right? Why would you take this out? Why would you take this out? You know. And then like, I won't go through all this. This is a bit of a more of a higher end presentation I did, right? But you know, when you really look under the hood, if you will, you start to find out that it's well known that geocentrism is viable, even dynamically. But
let me give an example of that real quick. That there is a difference between what we think is happening with the moon and what the globe Earth is thinking is happening with the moon. And if you go back in time, this is something I've tried to figure out and I cannot find it. That's a pretty big shift, right? So we're told that they believed in geocentrism, and then here comes Copernicus, and they flipped to heliocentrism. Okay, But the problem with that is that in that situation, you have to change the moon. The moon, rather than it going around once a day, like we see it, going in a clockwise motion once a day, had to be switched to going in a counterclockwise motion once a month. So where I don't have any I cannot find any writings of this being even discussed. You're telling me that they just said, oh, by the way, the moon is now going the opposite direction than you see it. Yeah, you see it in the sky go the same direction as the sun. It actually goes the opposite way. And people just accepted it. And nobody even wrote about it or anything. It doesn't even make sense. How could you have switched the moon to, oh, you know what, guys, it doesn't orbit? Because think about it. Before they knew they were spinning, before they knew they were on a ball or anything, they would have assumed that the moon goes around once a day. That's what it does. Look at the fucking sky. So how did they get told, oh, by the way, you were wrong about that? It actually goes around once a month and goes the opposite direction. And everyone's just like, oh, cool. There's not even any writing about it. Like, it never happened in history. So there's things like that that just fall through the cracks that they can't explain because it doesn't work. Where's the talking about this? Where's the discussion about the moon flipping from going once a day clockwise to once a month counterclockwise? There's no discussion of it, at least that I've ever found.
Yeah, it's crazy. And like you did kind of allude to this, but like just over time, they're able to slowly craft these narratives and revise history so much so that now we're left with, this illusory polished model. And it's literally a house of cards. It's all lies. All lies. Like this right here, right? Like you'll never be told this unless you find a show like this one, where Einstein said in 1925, mind you, 20 years after special relativity. Shout outs. Shout out to who donated on Ko-fi, and we will read it off here in a second. All right. If Dr. Miller's results should be confirmed, that is Dayton Miller, then the special relativity theory and with the general theory in its present form falls. Experiment is the supreme judge. Only the equivalence of inertia and weight would remain, which would lead to an essentially different theory. This is in reference to tests done by someone named Dayton Miller that you've never heard of. You've never heard of the test. This guy was completely blackballed. They lied about him. They consistently tried to refute him while he was alive. He kept dunking on everyone. Was like, "Give me your best idea as to why this is wrong." And then he would go directly to the lab and he would test it and disprove it. They were like, "Oh, it's the heat." He's like, "Okay, here I'm introducing radiant heat sources directly beside the device," and then proving unequivocally that that wasn't the case. They couldn't do anything with him. And then he died, and then they all stick their chest out, act like they knew he was wrong, and they've basically just done away with his data. It's, like, almost impossible to find it. Then you have Maurice, I guess I say Elias, but I think it's Allais or whatever. He won a Nobel Prize as an economist. He did a mathematical review of the data from Dayton Miller, and he discovered that the maximum and minimum friendships landed on the spring and fall equinoxes, which is impossible. It can't be just a coincidence that it shifts throughout the year as the sun moves in its path, and then you get the maximum and minimum friendship based on the equinoxes. So why are these measurements, these interferometry measurements, showing that we're detecting what's happening in the sky moving if it's supposedly us moving? And it's just been erased. It's been removed. And if you look up Dayton Miller right now, they'll basically say he was a crackpot, that he's been completely debunked. They'll push like a few different people that I've played, like they cherry picked. One of the things they did to Dayton Miller, because this is all the same idea. It's like this is the only time it's valid to say why would they lie? Like if your model is true, how come every single evidence proposed and every single narrative that's proposed and everything that we Google that we're given to that's proposed, it's all deceptive. It's all a lie. If your model's true, why would you have to lie about all of it? With Dayton Miller, what they did was after he died, again, they went in and they cherry picked a section. I mean, he had done over 5 million. He had gotten over 5,200,000 measurements because he was getting like multiple measurements at the same time and kept the device running, right? And so they cherry picked out of all of these measurements the portion where he very clearly explains that now what he's going to do is try to see what all it requires to get it closer to zero, to get the friendship closer to zero. Is that the mainstream model and relativity are claiming that it should be zero. It's just instrumental error. He's like, we've proven unequivocally that's not the case. And that's why Einstein made these quotes. He made 2 of these quotes where he's just like, dude, if Dayton's right, then we're screwed, right? My whole theory collapses like a house of cards is his other quote. Because if it was something as simple as, oh, the temperature's messing with the instrument causing error, they would have all said that and it would have been over with. But he proved that wasn't the case. They couldn't even come up with a way that it was the error. Well, my point here is that he died. They retroactively go back and cherry pick out the data that he was specifically messing with the test, doing all these different things to try to see what all you would have to do to actually get it closer to zero. And then they take that out and say, look, even Dayton Miller's own data shows that it's actually tending to zero. How insane is that? I mean, he just grossly had to change the test, right? And what they do to try to get zero is they'll make asymmetrical arm links and they'll put them in all these different mediums and run them through crystals and go deep underground, whatever they can do to try to get it closer to zero. They'll just mess with the test, literally won't do the test. And so anyway, and that's a whole rabbit hole. My point is, again, you were just blatantly lied to about that. Another thing is, if you look up Michelson-Morley, it'll tell you that it disproved the ether. But that isn't true. That isn't at all true. So it's just like weird, right? Like, how does someone not see this reoccurring pattern that everything we're told in the mainstream, when you Google it, the alleged proofs and evidences are lies? People want to know why flat Earth is a thing or why flat Earth isn't going anywhere, because we actually did the research. We actually went and looked into these claims and found out that they're all lies.
We didn't just believe Stephen Hawking when he said a helicopter went behind a hill of water. We looked into it and said, oh, you faked it. And then, I mean, or the with the Nat Geo saying, oh, look at the boats, we're missing these stripes and it went beyond the curve when you can see the horizon behind the boat. It's like, you wouldn't need to lie. If the Earth was a sphere, then you would send Stephen Hawking and his little team out there and you would prove that it's a sphere. You wouldn't go out and fake a helicopter going behind water and be like, there, sphere. Because when somebody found that out, like we did, what do you expect people to do? Say, well, I still buy it. I still think you're right. I know, yeah, you just had to fake it because, granted, that's pretty tough to hide a helicopter behind 6 miles of water. So I guess you had to fake it. I mean, there's no sense in that. In fact, this is how I know that globe Earth believers are just basically cheerleaders for the globe model, and they don't care about truth. They don't care about anything. Because if one of us ever cheated on a test, if when I went out to the canal, if I just showed one observation that it looked like a flat Earth and came back to my channel and said, look, this, and I didn't even fake it. I just kind of said, this one observation proves it. I would be hung by these people, that they would just call me every name in the book. But when Stephen Hawking actually fakes with CGI a helicopter going behind water, they say nothing. When SpaceX fakes a live stream on YouTube, essentially destroying the idea of live streams, it means that anybody can change a live stream and then still call it a live stream. You'll never know. And we've proven that. So if that, and then did they speak out about it? No, they back it up. They're like, oh, well, maybe they had a reason. And, it's the same landing. It's just a different camera view. Yeah. But there's nobody else who's allowed to do that. Major League Baseball, the news, NHL, nobody can go into a live stream and change history except for SpaceX. Makes no sense. And you guys just ignore it. You don't care. And you expect it to be just, we're all okay with that. Sorry that we don't think that people should be lied to, especially when you're calling it science. Sorry, if you're going to tell me how we prove the shape of the Earth and you're going to have this television show, then just prove it. How could it be easier to use CGI and fake it than it would just be to go prove it? You have all this equipment, all this money. You can hire a helicopter. You can get all these people there and camera crews. Then just prove the shape of the Earth. When we find out you're lying about it and that you faked it, what do you expect people to do? It's ridiculous. It's embarrassing. And going back to Elias, which I think is one of the craziest things, is that he, in his paperwork, kept referring to a periodicity of the pendulum or something that kept coming out at 24 hours and 50 minutes. And he could not find anything. He said, there is nothing that coincides with that. But what do we know today? We know that that is the orbit of the moon, is 24 hours and 50 minutes. And he couldn't figure out what that had to do with the moon. Well, that's how long it takes the moon to go around the Earth. So, and then you take the total day of what they say the day is 365.2425 or whatever it is. That's how many days in a year. And then you multiply that out to get your hours, multiply that to get your minutes, and then divide that by 1490, which would be the orbit of the moon. 1440 is 24 hours plus 50 minutes, 1490, and you get exactly 353. It's actually 352.99. So that means that, so the orbit of the moon is actually a good timekeeper for the year because it works out perfectly. There's 353 exact moon days in a year, but they'll never tell you that because they think that this moon goes around in 27.74 day and it's going around backwards than what we see. And just none of that stuff even works. And yeah, I've been thinking about eclipses recently. That think of how quickly we see an eclipse happen. The moon passes in front of the sun, or think of how quickly the Earth's supposed shadow passes in front of the moon. But we're told that that moon takes 27 days to go around the Earth. Well, it certainly looks like it passes the Earth, the shadow that it passes or whatever, looks like it's passing in what would take a day to go around. Think of how fast the moon or the shadow goes across the moon. It takes like 2 hours or even less. So then that's because it has only a day to get around, but yet we're told it's a month. It's just none of the things actually work to me. It all falls apart.
And it's also crazy because you obviously you have the 28-day lunar cycle, and then we used to have 13 months. That gives you 364 days. You have like the extra day, and they would call it like the Ides of March. They have all these different names and reasons or celebratory traditions that they would use that day for. So, but no, what do we have? We have like 28 days, 30 days, 31 days, like all this nonsense, right? Where we have like
How about
October being the 10th month. Like in December being the 12th month, and it's just laughable. It's laughable. The devotion, like to even push this narrative, has required so many lies, so much deception, so much counterintuitive nonsense, so much unfalsifiable patchwork. Right? It's wild. And so if I looked up right here, proof the Earth moves around the sun, the primary evidence that Earth moves around the sun is the changing seasons. So wait. The primary evidence that the Earth moves around the sun is that the sun moves throughout the year to give us seasons.
But
What?
it's a fact that the sun sits still,
And then it says, which are directly caused by Earth's tilt on its axis as it orbits the sun. Wait, because they're presenting it as, look, we have a model and we say that the Earth is tilted, and what do you know? That's exactly what we see with the seasons. And that proves our theory that there's a tilted globe that's moving around the sun. No, that's literally where you get the idea of the tilt from in the first place. Literally, they had to add the idea the Earth was tilted later on after the fact because of the seasons. It wasn't the other way around, bro. It wasn't like they made a physical measurement. It didn't pop out in space and say, "Here's 90 degrees. Look, the Earth's on a tilt." What do you know? It matched it. That's not what happened. They made up the tilt based on what the sun does. This is their primary evidence, bro. This is Google. Leading to different amounts of sunlight reaching different parts of the planet at different times of the year. Additionally, the observation of stellar parallax. Oh, stellar
Really?
parallax. Let's look at stellar parallax. So here we have a geocentric and a heliocentric, right? Geocentric on the top, heliocentric on the bottom. Never shown. They'll never show it to you because there is no difference. Literally, you can just flip it around. And before you get into the shoddy nature of the claims of parallax and the alleged measurements of it, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Literally, you just flip it around kinematically. It works perfectly on a geocentric model.
And also,
Objectively.
it's good to point out that those angles that they draw there, with the N being the star, right, and these angles being drawn at it, the angles are 89.99999. So they're actually both straight lines. They're just, it's like ridiculous that they make it seem like, oh, that'd be easy to calculate. Think about that. 1 degree would be tough to tell. Now I get it. You can have more precise than that. You can get into half degrees. You can get into arc seconds, whatever. But to think that we can just, 89.999 and this one's 89.992, it just means everything's like a box. And then talking about parallax, how is it that I just pulled up that paper from Harvard where this person's asking here, why do some stars have negative parallax? Here's the answer for that. The parallax is a very distant star, should be 0, or at least indistinguishable from 0. If the parallaxes have an observational uncertainty, which they do, then half of the parallaxes of very distant stars will be negative. I think this is all that you're finding in the case of absolute parallaxes. So, and then what the paper says from Harvard is when you find a negative parallax, just zero it out. So imagine what they're saying. They're saying it's always 0. There's some wishy-washiness. There's going to be a little bit of uncertainty. If the uncertainty ever falls in the negative, put it to 0 and leave the positive parallax and then report that. And that's the parallax that we have. What? What do you mean? You can't. So why don't you erase the positive parallax and then say everything's going backwards? If that's what you're doing, you're just taking a number. You're saying get rid of the negative because that can't be true. and we'll just accept all the positive, even though you just said that that is in the variance allowed by the observations, that there's an uncertainty. Everything falls in the uncertainty, but get rid of anything negative, call the positive true. I mean, the fact that people think we can figure out these distances to stars, I think one time I did the math on it too, that it's the equivalent of if you lived on a golf ball, okay, and you were in the northern part of California, so all the way up at the top of California on a golf ball, tiny little golf ball, and you're a little human being, really tiny on there. It'd be like figuring out the distance to another golf ball at the bottom of California, which is just insane. It's just stupid that you think you just look through a telescope and you can figure out distances to things not even close to. I mean, if people saw the difference between how far away you have to be if you play it on a short scale, right? Like you can't build a solar system model in your city because the next planet may be many cities away, or the next star will be hundreds of miles away. So it's just it's an insane postulation, and it's just something that's sold to people. I don't know. Have you heard all these people that are believing in the Earth moving up now? These rising Earthers.
Yeah.
Let me tell you my real problem with that. Number one, the heliocentric model requires a vacuum of space in which there is nothing. And the reason for that is because it needs to be flying through it. And if it's flying through it, how doesn't the atmosphere fly off? How isn't it slowed down? How is it allowed to just spin freely? Well, because the vacuum of space has no impedance. It's like a zero viscosity. You're just able to move around there with no nothing. You're not even wind getting, you don't feel any wind. You're just floating in the outer space. Okay, great. So we've obviously said that we don't agree with that at all. We don't think that that could exist next to a pressurized system anyway, obviously. But yet, if we're going to be now we're moving up, well, then again, you're placing the Earth in space because it has to be moving up through what? And if it's moving up through space, then how is it not impeded by anything? Well, then it has to be another vacuum. So the vacuum is just their necessity. So they can never say that there's something there. They can really, I mean, I know now they're saying there's vacuum energy or this, that. They have to make it so that it can't impede the flying Earth, when that's just ludicrous. So when you're going to make the Earth now move up, then you have to buy into that idea again. And I know I'm alone in this, or at least how I feel. I feel like it's a mistake to put the Earth anywhere. To say the Earth is put in somewhere, well, then you're putting it in space. And so we don't know that. I mean, who taught us that there's space that we were put into? Whereas I believe the Earth is all that there is. This is everything. So there is nothing that we're flying through. There's nothing that we're moving through. There's nothing impeding us. We're not moving up. We're not moving sideways at 1.2 million miles per hour. And that's what our senses say. So if you're going to convince me of otherwise, it's going to take some work. And obviously they don't have good enough evidence to sell me.
No, yeah. And like, if the primary objective is, look, what we were told about the Earth is wrong, then this, like, let's come up with all kinds of different ideas and then make it like this identity of ours that's super important, call everyone to shill if they don't agree with it, then you're literally just helping them, right? Because the primary part should be like, look, they told us that the Earth is this, and it is not. It is a lie. It is wrong. And we're all trying to figure out what it is, but we were lied to about what the Earth is. That's the whole point. And, I just consider stuff like that. Yeah, like a divisive tactic to take away from that. And so here is obviously parallax, and of course another one is stellar aberration, which I have a slide for that one as well right here. Stellar aberration, same thing. Aberration direction of the star, true direction of the star. You can just flip it around with the Earth in the center. Here is an important aspect of what it really happened. People think that Newton was some genius and he saw an apple and then somehow figured out how the universe works or whatever. But he took.
Miss and I were walking the other night and we saw the moon, and I was like, just imagine somebody looked up at the moon and said, that moon appears to be falling.
Yeah.
Who said that? Somebody would have slapped him across the face. Like, what are you talking about? The moon's not falling? Yeah, I think if you look up there, it's probably falling at a massive speed around the Earth. Like, what are you, the moon, that moon up there? No, it's not.
Yeah. It's so weird. It's also weird. It's like, and I go back and forth, like, were these stories just made up, or I don't know. People are kind of insane. Like, there are insane people. I go listen to some of the theoretical physicists talk now. Like, it's definitely possible that there were just these characters that were insane. You have here, what really happened is you take Kepler's law, and what you can do is you can just arbitrarily throw mass into it and then claim it's dynamic. That's all that Newton did. Newton didn't come up with his theory of gravity, then go fact check it with the planets and be like, yo, it works. No, he took Kepler's laws that had geometrically mapped out the motion of the planets that we see from the Earth, and then he took that and threw mass in it. That's when if you can actually solve the equation and pull out the dynamic parts of mass, and you're left with Kepler's kinematic laws. So he didn't do anything. And what's even funnier, he throws that mass in there and he's like, so basically just the idea of whatever matters there is somehow inherently causing the motion. Like it wasn't even genius at all. It was like, well, we know everything has like matter. So let's just say that that matter has a magical property that causes everything to move around each other by pulling it around it. And I don't know what it is and couldn't really explain how it works. And please don't attribute that to me because I think if this is true, God has to be doing it directly live time. And I don't even get how it could possibly work. There must be some type of medium doing it, even in theory. But now they tell you Newton proved heliocentrism because he was a genius. And by 22, he figured out gravity and calculus. It's like, that isn't what happened. You
He
reverse
invented
engineer.
it. Yeah.
You'll never get a rebuttal to these things that I'm saying, by the way. You'll never get a rebuttal to the fact that actually all that he did was take Kepler's laws, which are kinematic, arbitrarily add mass, and then claim and make a dynamic claim. But it's not actually a dynamic claim or proof of any type of dynamic claim. It's literally just kinematics with an added variable. That's just objective. You'll never hear a rebuttal, but you'll still hear people double back and claim that somehow Newtonian gravity proves that the Earth moves around the sun and that the planets all move around the sun or whatever. And then when you see here, what else does it say? It says, further evidence includes the consistent patterns of planetary movements described by Kepler's laws. How does the fact we see all the planets moving in the sky mean the Earth is moving? And so, I mean, we could go all day about this, but in conclusion on this part of it, the heliocentric part of it, the top things that they propose as evidence that the Earth moves around the sun, because I created this question and I explicitly add the word exclusive for a reason, right? Because I don't want your arbitrary idea of which one you think is better. Like, do you actually have proof that's exclusive to your belief, right? Do you have any exclusive evidence that the Earth moves around the sun? And so at first I was getting claims such as what we've talked about, the seasons. So the fact that the sun has an analemma and it has a path that changes throughout the year, and that gives us seasons, that actually proves the Earth's not moving or the sun's not moving, and it's the Earth that's moving. That's stupid. Okay. And then stellar aberration, same thing. The movement of the stars somehow proves that it's not the stars moving. That's ridiculous and not proof of heliocentrism at all. And then you have retrograde. The fact that the planets look like they kind of go backwards, and they say that's because the sun, the Earth is moving around the sun. Dude, if you just take the axis, the central portion of the coordinate system, and move it over to the Earth and have everything keep moving, which I have a video I'll find here in a second that literally visually shows you that with retrograde, if you just move the Earth to the center, it's exactly the same. They would appear to go backwards, even though they're not. They're all just moving around the Earth. Very simple. It's literally just a kinematic equivalence. Retrograde doesn't prove it at all. Kepler's laws in general, how all the planets move, it doesn't prove it at all. I just showed you guys a few videos of the heliocentric and geocentric coordinate systems with all the planets and how it changed. It doesn't, the fact we see the planets move doesn't prove that the Earth is the one moving. It's just asinine. So what happened was it took me like 2 years of just like drilling this home, and they fought it. And you would go check out like these anti-flat earth channels, and they would swear up and down that those things I just listed were exclusive proof that we move around the sun. And they've kind of changed their tune now, and we finally reached this next step where none of them will say those things. None of them will claim parallax, retrograde, aberration, seasons. No one that's even sort of keeping up with the conversation now will claim those things anymore. And just like when Bennett was talking to the PhD astronomer and professor Robert Parks, and he brought up parallax, and so they were going to quickly bring up that slide about parallax. He's like, "Oh no, I know that's not actually evidence that we're moving around the sun, right?" And so then what I found when I talk to people like him or the aerospace engineer guy or whoever it is, when I ask them like what I always end up coming to, what it ends up being, I talked to other guys like a PhD physicist that's retired a few days ago, same thing. What we come to at the end is they say they think the heliocentric model is simpler or more economic. It makes more sense to them intuitively. Okay. And these are PhDs. So if I now hear if someone's on X right now talking reckless about how stupid we are and we know the Earth is moving around the sun because of the way the planets move or something. No, you're projecting your ignorance. That isn't the case. So, and fact check everything I'm saying, but I'll just tell you that's where we've gotten to now is that they think it's quote unquote more economic or it's simpler. And if you think that the idea is that the sun appears to be moving, but it's actually not moving because the earth is tilted and wobbling, but we can't measure the wobbles and it's wobbling 3 or 4 different ways, but we can't detect it, and it's tilted, but we can't detect it, and it's actually spinning while it revolves around the sun, but we can't detect it, and then it's actually flying through the galaxy 500,000 miles per hour, while the galaxy goes 1.2 billion miles per hour through the universe, but we can't detect it. And the sun looks like it's moving, but it's actually still while all those other motions are going on the earth, but you just can't tell. If you think that that is simpler, bro, you think that's simpler? Okay, go for it. Okay, it's objectively not, and it's also not logical at all, right? Like you don't appealing to simplicity, even though it's literally not simpler, is just fallacious. It's actually really stupid. It's like a caveman approach, It's like, well, no, I see the evidence shows this, but I'm gonna believe it's over here because it's simpler for me to understand. So anyway, there's that, and I guess I just want people to think about that. Actually, if you guys are down, I'm gonna play this like little 4-minute video that kind of gives the mainstream narrative of heliocentrism real fast. That's cool.
Yeah, cool.
All right.
In perfect.
You guys heard that?
Yes.
I don't know how to make it. There we go. Okay.
You, me, every single thing on this planet.
Fair use act. We're commentating. So fall back.
We're all zooming through space right now, orbiting the sun at an average speed of 107,000 kilometers an hour, and rotating while we're doing it. But the sun, moon, planets, and stars all look like they're moving through the sky, right? So it's easy to imagine that we're staying put while they all move around us, as long as you don't look too closely. Which is why the whole idea that the Earth orbits the sun wasn't really accepted until a few hundred years ago, and it took a lot of convincing. A lot of the old geocentric model, where Earth's at the center of everything, was based on ideas developed by ancient Greek philosophers Aristotle and Ptolemy. They explained that the Earth stayed put at the
No. All ancient civilizations across the board for all recorded history acknowledged the default position that everything in the sky is moving around us.
Center of everything, and anything we can see in the sky, the sun, the moon, stars, planets, everything, orbited it in perfect circles. But that didn't explain why planets, which at the time referred to anything that looked different from the background stars, including the sun and the moon, sometimes changed brightness or occasionally looked like they were moving in a completely different direction. So the geocentric model tried to explain them using epicycles. These are imaginary points that were moving in imaginary circles with planets orbiting around those points. And it sort of worked, though eventually they had to draw more circles around the circles to explain some things and have the planets move faster or slower at certain points in their orbits. Diagrams of the sky were kind of a mess. There were at least a couple of Greek philosophers who disagreed.
Oh, the flower of life is kind of a mess.
Orbiting around those points. And it sort of worked, though eventually they had to draw more circles around the circles to explain some things and have the planets move faster or slower at certain points in their orbits. Diagrams of
sacred geometry and the golden ratio is kind of a mess. Interesting. We need to rename it. It's kind of a mess. But what a coincidence we get this very pattern in all of physics and all scales from the small to the big. But it can't be what we observe it to be in all scales, right? That's crazy.
Of the sky were kind of a mess. There were at least a couple of Greek philosophers who disagreed, and the geocentric model was questioned by Muslim scholars since at least the 10th century. But for a long time, especially among Western civilizations, it was just accepted. Everything revolved around the Earth, even if it was hard to explain sometimes. At least until Copernicus came along. Nicolaus Copernicus was a well-known Renaissance thinker who spent the last few decades of his life developing a heliocentric model, where the sun is the center of the universe, which he published just before he died. And okay, we know that the sun isn't the center of the universe, but it was a lot closer to the truth. Copernicus realized that the math was a little simpler if you just had Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, the only planets we knew about at the time, orbiting the sun with the moon orbiting the Earth. He used epicycles.
So he realized the math was simpler. That's his argument.
And I mean, you just have to look at the forward of Copernicus's book. That it wasn't even, they didn't even say it was probable, right? You get the exact words here. But if these were, so here, hence certain scholars, I have no doubt, are deeply offended and believe that the liberal arts, which were established long ago on a sound basis, should be thrown out into confusion. But if these men are willing to look and examine the matter closely, they'll find that the author of this work has done nothing blameworthy, for it is the duty of an astronomer to compose the history of the celestial motions through careful and expert study. Then he must conceive and devise of the causes of these motions or hypotheses about them. Since he cannot in any way ever attain the true causes, he will adopt whatever suppositions enable the motions to be computed correctly from the principles of geometry for the future as well as the past. The present author has performed these duties excellently, for these hypotheses need not be true nor even probable. On the contrary, if they provide a calculus consistent with the observations, that alone is enough. So perhaps there is someone so ignorant of geometry and optics that he regards the epicycle of Venus as probable, or thinks that there's a reason why Venus sometimes precedes and sometimes follows the sun by 40 degrees and even more. Is there anyone here who is not aware that the assumption is necessarily follows the diameter of the planet at perigee should appear 4 times and the body of the planet more than 16 times as great as apogee? Yet this variation is refuted by experience in every age, basically saying, think of the size that Mars should be when it's on this side of the sun close to us versus when it's away from the sun on the other side of us. Should be a difference of like 16 times its diameter, angular diameter, and it's not seen. In this science, there are some other no less important absurdities, which need not be set forth at the moment. For this art, it is quite clear, is completely and absolutely ignorant of causes of the apparent non-uniform motions. And if any causes are devised by the imagination, as indeed very many are, they are not put forward to convince anyone that they are true, but merely to provide a reliable basis for computation. However, since different hypotheses are sometimes offered for one and the same motion, for example, the eccentricity of an epicycle in the sun's motion, an astronomer will take his first choice as the hypothesis which is easiest to grasp. The philosopher will sometimes seek the semblance of the truth, but neither of them will understand or state anything certain unless it has been divinely revealed to them. Therefore, alongside the ancient hypotheses, which are no more probable, let us permit these new hypotheses also become known, especially since they are admirable as well as simple, and bring with them a huge treasure of very skillful observations. So far as hypotheses are concerned, let no one expect anything certain from astronomy, which cannot furnish it, lest he accept the truth ideas conceived for another purpose and depart this study a greater fool than when he entered it. I'm afraid many people have done that. Sorry, go ahead.
Wow. I mean, yeah, that's totally not what we're told about him.
No, and then the whole story behind that is just false too. I mean, we were told Copernicus submitted this book on his deathbed. He was so afraid of the Catholic. Then you find out what he was preaching about it in front of popes and Catholic priests 10 years before his death, talking about heliocentricity. So he obviously didn't wait till his deathbed, and then that was in the forward of his book. It was unauthored. It didn't say who wrote that. People assumed it was Copernicus. Now they tell you, oh, it was the book producer, what do you call it? Editor or whatever, publisher. The publisher, like that could ever happen. Copernicus submitted his book, the publisher got it, and then wrote himself in there a forward, and it wasn't known until years later that it was actually that person who, like, Copernicus wouldn't have said anything. Like, that guy just added something to my book at the beginning and didn't write his name after it. It's just crazy.
Yeah, that reminds me that the whole Galileo thing, we're lied to about that as well, who specifically made it very clear before he died that heliocentrism was not true. He didn't believe in it at all and that it couldn't be true. So that's funny. No, that's very interesting, man. I think that we have to go through the painful process of like teaching the true history of what happened with the development of the heliocentric model, because people don't know about it. Anyone that's interested in truth, when they start to see that they're being blatantly lied to, that they're like deceptively omitting the truth to present this narrative to you about how the heliocentric model was developed and is true, if you're actually someone looking for truth, you will, of course, reject that. And then you will pursue the truth and the piece of information that was omitted. Then you will formulate a conclusion based on that. And there's a large amount of people who literally, like, they can't listen to this show. They can't hear you read that page. They can't, like, they just reject it outright. And then they willfully choose to hold on to this other narrative, whatever will pop up on Google. And that is wild to me. That is wild to me. So really, that's what the division here is. It isn't this, you get to use this term flat earthers to try to put people in a little box and then say whatever you want to about them. No, there's a group of people that actually researched what we were told to be true. And there's a group of people who have not done that. That is actually the situation. All right, cool. Let's just play this out so people get the mainstream side.
Cycles too, but all the planets in his model kept the same speed throughout their orbits, which is what you'd expect if the orbit is a circle. But it was still hard to prove that the heliocentric model was more accurate. For one thing, even if they made things simpler, those circular orbits in Copernicus's universe were wrong, and it was just as bad as the geocentric model for predicting how the planets would move. Then in the early 1600s, Johannes Kepler realized that orbits didn't have to be circles, and if he assumed that they were ellipses, the math fit the motion of the planets, sun, and moon a lot better using the heliocentric model. Around the same time, Galileo Galilei's telescope made things even more convincing, mostly thanks to Jupiter and Venus. When Galileo pointed his telescope at Jupiter, he was able to see its 4 biggest moons: Ganymede, Callisto, Io, and Europa. They were pretty concrete proof that not everything in the sky was orbiting Earth. Then he noticed something weird about Venus. It goes through phases just like our moon does, from new to full and back, but it's much bigger when it's new than when it's full. That made no sense in the geocentric model, which predicted that sometimes Venus would be closer to Earth when it was new, but sometimes it would be closer when it was full. In the heliocentric model, though, the Sun, Venus, and Earth lined up so that Venus would be closer to Earth when it was new. Even with all this evidence, it took a long time for the heliocentric model to be accepted. The church banned heliocentric works until 1758. These days we know that the heliocentric model wasn't exactly right either. The sun isn't at the center of the universe, there's a lot more out there, and if you want to get technical about it, both Earth and the sun orbit the same point, the center of mass of the solar system, which is just the center point of all the objects in it, based on their mass and how far they are from each other. Since the sun has 99.87% of all the mass in the solar system, the center of mass is pretty close to the center of the sun. But it does move around a bit, depending on where the planets are in their orbits. But one thing we know with 100% certainty is that the geocentric model is wrong. We've sent telescopes, probes, and people up there, and we've seen it for ourselves. Thanks for watching this episode of SciShow Space, which was brought to you by our patrons.
That goes to show you how stupid this guy is. If you sent stuff up there, you wouldn't see it for yourself anyway. Literally, if you sent people up into space, as we've been told, it wouldn't prove the heliocentric model. You wouldn't be able to tell. In order to know, you'd have to get far outside of our own galaxy. Well, he knows it for 100% certainty because people sent probes up there where it wouldn't prove anything. What a great point. This guy's crushing. And so much of what he said there is just wrong. But, you know, I mean, we could go through all of it, but it's all pretty simple. There's a narrative. Like, for example, they'll say one of the things they'll claim proves heliocentrism and proved gravity and stuff was the discovery of Jupiter. You've heard this one, I'm sure. And that's a lie. Actually, the guy attributed to discovering Jupiter, whenever they saw Jupiter, which, by the way, had already been observed multiple times and documented long before this alleged discovery. So then it's not a discovery, is it? And he was like, oh, that can't be the planet that my math predicted. That's way off. It was so far off that he was like, that's not what my math predicted. And basically everyone that was looking into these planets and the heliocentric model at all and messing with gravity at all was making random predictions of other planets. And they had this huge spectrum of predictions, quote unquote, and guesses of where you see another planet. And then he was the closest and was still multiple degrees off, so much so that he thought it must be a different planet. And then he was grossly wrong about the masses and the distances. And then the official story is that, well, he just so happened to get lucky because it was the moment within Jupiter's cycle that it's the closest to the Earth. And so it minimized the error. And he was so far off with the distance, but coincidentally, just the right amount off of the mass as well, that it basically worked well enough for him to discover it. Okay, so that is not the story you'll be told. You'll be told that we know the heliocentric model is true and that Newtonian gravity was verified because they took the heliocentric model, they took Newton's gravity, they threw it into an equation. They were then able to say, okay, that must mean there's another planet here. And they looked up and they're like, boom, look, we discovered the planet that our math predicted. That didn't happen at all. That's a complete and total lie.
Doesn't
So
even make any
why?
sense. You would assume that rather than saying like, oh, maybe we're off on one of the masses or the gravitation of one of these planets out there. How would you assume you have that right? Oh, this planet's acting weird, and we know we've got Jupiter's right. We know we've got these other planets right. We know their exact mass, so we'd be able to. We know that there's something missing. You wouldn't know that. Complete
And they
fabric.
even say there's something out there today. They still call it, Planet X. They're not sure what it is, creating gravitational anomalies along the outer solar system, yada yada yada. Yeah, it's just nonsense. Their whole model falls apart when you start actually trying to apply logic to it. That's why they had to make up dark matter and dark energy and all this nonsense.
And people used to be so much more honest about this stuff. So there's like a Harvard professor who wrote about how that it's laughable that people invoke that as evidence of gravity and that he predicted Jupiter or whatever. He said it was incredibly lucky at the least that he even got remotely close. And then guess what? It's like almost impossible to find the paper. I have it archived somewhere. I have screenshots and stuff. I have screenshots of like references in other papers to his quotes, but why is it so hidden? Why is it being hidden? Probably the same reason that the fact that we found trees deep in the earth in these sedimentary layers that they claim are millions of years old, requiring the top of the tree be 1 million year old and the bottom be 10 million years old. You can't Google that anymore. You won't find it. You literally have to use Yandex to find out that piece of information. Right? It's the same reason why you won't be able to just Google Harvard professor says that the alleged Jupiter discovery is fallacious or lucky. He used the word lucky. You'll never be able to find it on Google. They have to lie about it. It's so weird. It's like every single part of it. Dude, if the Earth was really a sphere that was tilted, wobbling, spinning, revolving around the sun, you would never care to do that, right? Like, would you ever have to do any of that? You wouldn't care what really happened or didn't happen or who thought what or who was wrong about what. What's it matter? Like if the Earth is actually doing this, it just is what it is. But no, they had to go back and retroactively recreate a historical timeline with historical claims that aren't true. Now, you would have to probably do something like that if your theory is wrong, if it's a lie. I don't want to say that too many times, but all right. So anyway, that is the heliocentric one, and obviously, just to touch on it, I am launching up a new series about geocentrism, so we'll cover that in depth. And then School and Glover's coming back, so we'll talk more and more in depth about the geocentrism thing on my channel. But yeah, anyone have anything else they want to throw in about that specifically?
Just that. I can't remember her name.
Mary.
Late 70s, she was working for a TV media company, and she didn't like she pretty much said that she saw them changing the news right there in like real time almost. Like you're saying they're doing on YouTube here, SpaceX is able to do that. Well, she was saying they would say a story and then, a few days later they would pretend like they never even said that story and go with this other story. So she started recording everything, like all the major channels for like 28 years, I believe. Her and her children did this. And I believe it's now able to be, they're archiving it now on the internet. So you can go back and watch like TV, it's 24 hours a day of all the old news channels and all that kind of stuff. So that's just something I wanted people to be aware of out there. If you're going to be doing research, that might be some place to go look.
You know they attacked the Internet Archive?
Yeah, I saw that. The Wayback Machine was hacked.
That and there's a thing called Archive. Also.
That's messed up.
Yeah, let me read the super chat. Linda Safkin, thank you. Always good work, guys. Thank you so much for $25 tip on Ko-fi. Anonymous Ko-fi supporter, thank you for the $5. And Raxo Hearn, thanks to the GLOBEBUSTERS crew. Blessings to all. Thank you so much for the kind words and $25 tip. Shout out to you guys. And yeah, if you want to support the stream, help us get to our goal. I think we're like 20% right now, I think. Ko-fi.com/GLOBEBUSTERS. And the link is pinned in the YouTube chat. Ko-fi, ro-fi.com/.
And over on Rockfin, big shout out to Trevor7, tipped $5. Said, I just read an article claiming that mega buildings are slowing the spin of Earth. You have to be mega stupid to believe that. Long live GLOBEBUSTERS.
Wow,
Yeah,
you
I
know what's so
remember.
crazy is they go back and forth between the Earth is slowing down and speeding up.
I know. I heard one physicist, right? They said this physicist said that if 10 million people picked up a fidget spinner and all spun it in the same direction, we would slow down or speed up the direction of Earth. It's like, oh my goodness. You know how many ceiling fans are spinning right now?
Yeah, this
You
is
know what I mean?
the plague of the globe mine too. If you showed them, look, you go to an upload date within like days of each other, you'll find different pop sci articles coming from different papers that say the Earth is slowing down, and the other one says the Earth is speeding up. And the globe mind will then start to try to figure out live time as they speak out loud, as if they know, trying to convince you how the Earth could be both slowing down and speeding up at the same time. 100%. 100%. That's what they would do. Like, you know,
I couldn't live like that. I would,
it's
you
crazy.
know, you have to be able to call BS BS when you see it.
So can you you guys can see my screen share still, right?
The Google page?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Do one of you guys care to read through this supposed proof of the globe? I have to grab something downstairs real quick.
Yeah. It says, the Earth is widely accepted as a globe due to multiple lines of evidence, including the round shadow it cast during a lunar eclipse, the disappearance of ships over the horizon as they sail away, different star constellations visible depending on your location, the ability to circumnavigate the globe, and photographs from space clearly showing Earth's curvature. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and the problem with circumnavigation is that they never, at least, focus on the. You can do it north-south, either east-west or west-east, because they just said circumnavigate the globe. But the problem here is that nobody circumnavigate the globe north-south or south-north, right?
Right.
So in the flat Earth model, you don't have any problem to circumnavigate west-east or vice versa. But when they put this, this is just a commentary, just because it produced me indignation. I don't know if that word is correct in English, because they just give away like, okay, you can circumnavigate in any direction, any axis you want. But the truth is that nobody did that circumnavigation.
And the real truth is, if you really look at it, I think that the layout of the globe, the way that we've been lied to about it, because again, I believe, and I believe everybody who's a heliocentrist would believe it. If you tried telling them that north and south are different than east and west, they'd lose their mind, because it's all just directions and a ball's the same no matter which direction you go. Well, no, actually it's not, because north and south are always directly cardinal directions. If you're standing south of me, I'm north of you, period. If you're 180 degrees from me, I'm 360 from you. That's just the way it works. But east and west are not like that. So if you look at the AE map, there's a reason why when you transfer the AE map onto a globe, why those things have to be true. It's because look at the AE map. North and south are the same. They have to be. North being at the middle, south being towards the outer edge. So no matter where you're standing, if somebody is north of you, you're south of them, and vice versa. But east and west are actually circles, because the Earth is a circle. So therefore, on the globe, they couldn't make, it's not like we could have a globe that has an east and west pole and north and south. Think of the lines of longitude and latitude. Latitude are parallels, and the north-south lines, longitude lines, are all great circles. So this is why you get those crazy lines drawn on a map when you say a plane's flying the Great Circle Route, and they're like these crazy lines, but you don't get that north-south on flights. Why not? Well, because north-south on the AE map is always north-south, and east-west are circles. So they didn't just come up with the globe and say, okay, let's just choose to put a north and south pole, and let's just choose to put these lines that all meet at the north and south pole, and we'll put these parallels going east and west. No, it was required because that's what the original layout calls for. We have a North Pole, which means north and south are cardinal directions. East and west are going to always be circles. So therefore, they made the parallels the circles. It's exactly what you would expect. It's not as simple as just, the globe can't. We just chose to make east and west, the parallel lines, be parallel to each other in the equator. Because then they tell the story. If you ask somebody what's the only great circle on the Earth, they'll tell you the equator. But that's not true. Every line of longitude is a great circle. So if you travel north-south, you're always traveling north-south because you're on a line of longitude. But if you travel east-west, you're always in a circle, and you're not actually, because you're not going towards the East Pole and the West Pole. East and West are different than North and South. And that's crazy when you find that out. But until you look at the A map, and you're like, oh, they have to be. North and South can't be the same as East and West. Look at the map. And so it just makes sense to me. It's like pretty self-explanatory. I was going to say something else, and I forgot. Just that, about Copernicus and whether or not his system was more easy to figure out, or what do they say? It was easier mathematically. But I don't even think that's the case. I think that if you look, they basically said that the claim that Copernicus advanced the heliocentric model of the cosmos, that he was advancing some true model, or that it made geocentrism the false model. But that's not even the case, right? If you ask why is heliocentrism more true than geocentrism, well, really, you're just getting a more zoomed out view. If you're zoomed in on the Earth, it looks like the sun goes around you. Pull out, now it looks like the Earth goes around the sun. Pull out, and you keep doing, and you just are going to lose connection with what is actually. This is why they have relativity. And so to think that you could have relativity, which says that you can't tell which one's happening, and then teach children that this Earth goes around the sun, well, then that is, you're able to tell which one. If you're going to teach children that the Earth goes around the sun, then therefore relativity must be thrown out, because it's all relative. If you're on the sun, it looks like the Earth goes around you. If you're on the Earth, it looks like the sun goes around you. How are you going to determine which one's true? Well, you're just again determining things philosophically, just like you did with this exposed, expanding universe. Another thing, you've got Edwin Hubble. Again, how many times to bring that up? To get away from the absolute horror of a unique position. So these guys were so afraid to say that the Earth could be at the center that they never even looked in or did any science or did any testing with it. In fact, all observations tell us that. So if all observations say you are the center, and you just have to make up some story, well, actually everywhere's the center. That's not science. That's gearing things towards what you want. And the truth is that there is no real difference between those three models. In fact, I think if you look at the Tycho's model, you look at Ptolemy's model, you look at Copernicus's model, all three were equal. They all could describe what was happening in the sky at equal truth. There wasn't like one came along and it was like way more true, so we have to accept this one. No, and it's all a story anyway. Like I said before, Copernicus did not submit his book on his deathbed. He was friends with the church. He was speaking in front of popes and things, and he just happened to put out his book towards it. But they're like, oh, he was on his deathbed, and that's not true. It's just a lie. Why do we have to tell this lie? It's like a setup. They want you to see it as this great shift from the biblical understanding to the scientific understanding, and that this is like a huge moment in the world for everyone. And it's not the case. When you actually go look at the history of what happened, it's not the case. And in fact, they talk about Galileo like he was some hero of science, and he was wrong. He was trying to force the tides on something other than the moon, and was getting proven wrong. That was his trying to prove that the heliocentrism was right. So he couldn't even prove that. So again, it's like these guys, they just give you a false story. They want you to believe in their idea of what happened, and it's just not the case. And so it's hard that you see that, and then you're expecting people in the science world to at least admit it, or to say, oh yeah, that's true. Like I was just looking at the Wikipedia for Almagest, and it's like it's going on and on about how great of a book it is, and you have to wait till all the way at the bottom and say, no, maybe it was kind of faked, and maybe the things don't actually match, and maybe he was off by all these different times when he's saying he observed the equinox, or he observed the solstice on a certain date and time, and then now we do the math and we're like, no, he's off by a day and a half. So he didn't actually observe anything. What he was doing is making it up based on these math numbers that they thought they had right, but then telling everybody in his book that he observed these with the greatest of care. Oh, it's a greatest of care that I observed these with the most strict observational necessities possible. And then you find out, no, you lied. Whoever wrote this book lied. They didn't actually do it on the date that they said they couldn't have. And again, I always bring up Anatoly Fomenko, and I'll actually bring up a little paragraph about it. But Anatoly Fomenko has found that they made a mistake in the math of these eclipses going back in time. You can show that, and then you go back and show that throughout history, they all made the mistake. So either it was all written after the fact and it's all a lie, or somehow the universe has been shooken up and we just missed some amount of time. I forgot what the amount exact is, but everything shifted a certain amount of time, and that's what would happen if you actually got the math wrong. Meaning, if I'm going to write a history of the past and I get the math, I say, hey, tell me when all the eclipses were so that I can write these eclipses into my past history, and then people will believe it. Okay, you give me the math, I figure it out, it's this many days back, great. But if I make a mistake and I'm off in my math, then all my dates in the past are going to be off. And if somebody in the future realizes that and says, wait a second, Jeran wrote these eclipses, but he's always off by a day and a half all the way back in time, how's that possible? Then you realize, oh, he wrote them based on incorrect math. None of this was observed. And that's what we get with history, is that none of it was observed. None of these things match up. They're just piecemeal, or it's like a story. It's meant to be a story, and they got the math wrong. And then when you figure that much out, you can go back in time and say, oh, all this history is incorrect, or it's been written in after the fact and adjusted, which is a sad thing. But did Austin come back?
Yeah. I guess what I don't get why people don't understand this part of it is someone had to actually do that, right? Like someone had to take like the historical records and the evidence that was there and had to go back and consciously rewrite it, tactically omitting vital pieces of information and twisting and lying to build this idea that the heliocentric model was this revolutionary scientific discovery that has been proven. What, like, how does someone not have an issue with that? Like it's not like,
But it works. It works. It allows
Oh,
you how
so
you use
weird.
GPS. It works.
why would any person have to intentionally go change the stories about heliocentrism in the globe? Why would you have to do that? I mean, there's an obvious reason why one would have to do that, right? It's because they're lying. I mean, it's just
Right.
crazy.
And if
like,
they
here's
were
Stephen Hawking
telling the
saying
truth, that's the dumbest way to do it. Because what would happen if somebody realized you were lying? Do you think they're going to then be like, oh, well, at least it's true? No, they're going to immediately call into question everything you said.
Exactly.
Something scientists would never do, these unbiased geniuses.
And it's not only like, okay, they didn't quite tell you the truth or they lied. When you find out what the truth of it actually was, it's super damning. So then you're like, oh, that's why you took it out. That's why you lied about it. Because the truth is damning to whatever propaganda narrative you're pushing. The government does this to this day, right? Like now they use Google. They'll just like memory hole things and erase things and revise history after the fact so that because they want to push out a certain propaganda narrative, there's certain pieces of evidence that counter that or refute that narrative. Well, what better way to keep your narrative alive than to just go remove that, remove the parts that refute it. This isn't like super complicated, and that's what they did. That's what they did with heliocentrism. And this is to me, it's like you have to be like gone not to see this, right? It's like everyone repeats the same narratives about the current model of the Earth. They all have the same talking points. And we're talking about people that normally point out, look at all this social engineering. We're all being propagandized, and everyone just repeating talking points they don't really know, and they're being brainwashed by the media. All these people that have noticed that for some reason, when it comes to the Earth, they all do the same thing. They seem incapable of seeing that they do the same thing. One of them is relativity is the most tested and verified theory ever. Like, why do so many people say that? Why do so many people that have never read it, don't understand it at all? Why do they all say that same thing? Right? Because it's a propaganda narrative.
They heard
So,
somebody smart say it, so they want to sound smart too.
and it's been pushed into the consciousness, and it's like another thing they'll all say is GPS relativity is proven because GPS has to use it or it wouldn't work. They all say that. That's literally not true though, right? Like, in fact, relativity didn't work at all. They had to bring in Ron Hatch to fix it specifically because of the fact that relativity didn't work. And it showed that the signals had a preferred direction. They would go faster in one direction than the other, which wasn't supposed to happen according to relativity. And then you ask them, wait, what do you mean by that? Exactly how? 95% couldn't tell you the first thing. Some of them will say atomic clocks. They'll know that. You're like, okay, how do atomic clocks work? Like, how does it prove this thing that you're saying? None of them know, right? So it's the same thing that it's the same people that would be like, Trump's a racist. And you're like, okay, what did he say or do that was racist? And they can't say anything. It's the same thing. These people can see how stupid that is, how stupid it is for you to passionately and emotionally defend the concept that Trump is a racist. But then when you say, okay, what did he say or do that was racist? And they can't say anything, they have nothing. And then maybe a couple of them will say, he he said that there were good people on both sides talking about Nazis and white supremacists. And then you'll say, well, if you actually go look at that clip in context, he specifically disavows the Nazis and white supremacists. That isn't true. So there's that part of it where there's like this narrative, this propaganda talking point that they'll all just kind of repeat because they didn't even take the time to go watch a 50-second clip of him talking. They didn't even take 2-3 minutes to research kind of what we're talking about here or to go look into any of the history. Right. So it's like there are layers to it, but it's exactly the same. I'm using the Trump thing because it's all in the mainstream consciousness right now, and it's the same exact thing. You have these people, and I guess what I'm saying is what's so wild to me is say like these conservative people, these talking heads or whatever, they will all laugh hysterically about how incredibly stupid it is to be like that, about like the Trump thing, right? Like people that just blindly believe and repeat what people say about Trump, but you ask them for like, can you give me an example, and they don't know anything. They like as in they never even like formulated their own thought their whole time. Like they just heard it and repeated it and believed it. But they can't see that they do that with this. And it's weird. It's like the globe has some special magic. And maybe it's because we were so young when we were told it. Like, is that what you guys think it is? The reason that like people that can normally notice this pattern and break out of it or not fall subject to it, like somehow they can't do that with the globe heliocentric model. You think it's just because it was ingrained so young?
I think it's more because of when you give people a piece of paper and tell them how smart they are, then you teach them something. Well, they're never going to even venture the thought that they were taught a lie. They just think that they're smart. So I think that they refuse to look at it with questions because I think of what it entails. In fact, my sister said this one time. It was shocking to me because I sent her a video about Sandy Hook and she watched like 15 minutes and then called me back. She goes, I'm not watching any more of this. And I'm like, why? What was wrong with it? And she goes, well, I just know where it's going to take me. I just know what it means if it's true. So she refused to even watch anymore because of its implications. So I think there's a lot of people like that. It scares them because it really does. If science is lying about this, then what else are they lying about? Are they lying about, are you lying about vaccines? Are you guys lying about diseases, viruses? What are you guys lying about? Is there such thing as atoms? Is there electrons? And then the whole thing falls apart.
Lying about the age of the earth? Are you lying about dinosaurs? Are you lying?
We know the age of the earth. I mean, even though trees stand up in these layers, we know the age of the earth.
And how crazy is it that you can't Google that? It's like
they've cleaned the internet, man. The internet is I feel bad for people who look for flat Earth now. I mean, the internet has been wiped. They've just taken out so much stuff and put in just the mainstream. And I mean, look what they did to YouTube. I mean, you can just go to YouTube, anybody. And I showed this on my show recently, showing again how they're able to change the results of my watch history in YouTube. And it takes out the pro flat Earth videos and leaves in the debunking videos. How the hell does YouTube know which videos are debunking flat Earth and which videos are pro flat Earth? And I've shown it. I'll go grab 10 videos right now on Durst's channel, my channel, Austin's channel. If they say flat Earth in them, I'll put it into my history. I'll then search them. And the only thing that will come up is the debunking videos, not the ones that we just put in the history. How are they doing that? And why is this the only subject that they do that on? Somebody show me your Bigfoot history being removed. I doubt it.
It's crazy. Yeah. They are aliens, right? Or even like reptilian overlords or whatever. And like, but I will say, if you go to Yandex, and so Yandex is kind of getting out there. Like the censorship's so bad that Yandex is like getting out there. Like, for example, I always use this as my example. If you type in witsitgetsit geocentrism is literally a title of a stream I did a couple years ago.
Right.
You do that in YouTube, dude, you're not going to find it. You're just not going to find it. You're going to find everything in the world. You go to Yandex, it is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th result. And, the third one is Schooling Globers, episode 33, Geocentrism from What's It Gets a channel, right? The other one is a couple of my debates. So you do actually get it on Yandex. But it's just wild to me because, like, even something as simple as so basically all the mainstream science, pseudoscience talking points are all you can find on Google, and all the evidence that debunks it has been removed. Flat Earth is just on a long list of things they're doing that with, and that is wild, bro. That why would anyone want to sit by and support that or play their role in that? It's so weird. And then here, like for example, if you were to say this to someone, just say it to someone, they would laugh at you and mock you and say you're stupid. You have no idea what you're talking about. And then you tell them, "Oh, that was Stephen Hawking," and then they'll start stuttering and try and find a way to, maybe we should do that. You know how people go around on like campuses and stuff, and they'll read like a quote from
Kamala Harris
Oh, yeah.
or yeah,
yeah,
and
that
say
can
it's
tell 'em
Trump.
yep, and then they'll like get super mad about it and be like, "That was actually Kamala," right? Um, maybe we should do that with this, right? I don't know, but
Did you hear
so
this flat earther said this? What do you think about that?
yeah,
And then,
Right.
actually, that was Neil deGrasse Tyson.
exactly, exactly. Because this quote here, he says, all this evidence that the universe looks the same whichever direction we look might seem to suggest there is something special about our place in the universe. In particular, it might seem that if we observe all other galaxies to be moving away from us, then we must be at the center of the universe. There is, however, an alternative explanation. The universe might look the same in every direction as seen from any other galaxy, too. This is, as we have seen with was Friedman's second assumption. We have no scientific evidence for or against this assumption. We believe it only on grounds of modesty. We believe it only on grounds of modesty.
Yeah,
It
because all
would
these
be
people are so modest, right?
it would be most remarkable if the universe looked the same in every direction around us, but not around other points in the universe. I mean, bro.
And then again, they how about using the idea of redshifting and blue shifting, which makes sense on Earth when we're talking about Doppler. Ambulance goes by you, here comes the sound, it's being crunched as it's coming towards you, and then it reaches you, and then as it's leaving, that sound wave is being stretched. Why? Because sound travels through air. So they apply the same thing to the starlight, which is what? What is it? I thought it's flying through a vacuum. How is it being stretched? Why is it being it's all traveling at the same speed? And again, they just apply that redshift and they say, oh, that redshift means these things are moving. And we don't even know that that's true. That it doesn't even apply to light in a vacuum, but they apply it. And we don't even know if that's true. I heard you talking about that. I don't know if it was on Friday night, maybe a couple weeks ago. Austin, you remember talking about the changes in the shifting of light? Was it you?
Yeah.
Or was it somebody else? Maybe it was you.
Yeah. You're talking about like redshift, blue shift.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. There's I mean, I have talked about it recently. I don't know, but there are multiple different explanations for it, and the idea that it's recessional velocity doesn't match the observational data at all because we have stuff that's way closer with way more redshift. That simple. There's stuff that's way closer that has way more redshift. But this is the part I always love to bring up about this, and let me actually do this right here. Let me Google it live. Let me make sure I'm sharing it. There we go. So, here we go. Dead star's magnetic field tricked astronomers into thinking it was heading our way. And this is about how they looked at a star and it was blue shifted. And they're like, oh, that must mean it's coming towards us. It's coming towards us, right? Because that's what they claim. They claim redshift because everything's moving away. And then they end up coming out and say, oh, never mind. We were tricked because it's actually just that it has a really strong magnetic field. So now mainstream astronomy has admitted that magnetic fields can cause the red and blue shift phenomena. That is a major, major problem for them because Now it's a more viable explanation for all the redshift and blue shift that we see, because that would explain why it's different. It's not consistent. It's not based strictly on distance. And if we're in a giant torus field, then we would expect there to be like a generally consistent increase of redshift further away from us because it's diverging out. But based on what other magnetic fields are within it, we're going to see a whole spectrum of things. It's not based strictly on distance. This is just like how with gravity, they believe it's based strictly on mass. So they have all these problems. But if you introduce magnetism, you don't have any problem, right? Because you can have two magnets the exact same size, exact same mass, way different magnetic fields. So in both scenarios, magnetism is far superior to the mainstream model and not even considered. I find it wild. And then obviously you guys have seen this. These are all these quotes that Jeran and I have read many times of all these people breaking down that the Earth could be in the center and that the evidence actually suggests that it's in the center. It's like 100. It's like over 100 quotes. And the only rebuttals I've ever got to this is that I cherry picked them. Okay. Cool. Okay, and then I guess what I was gonna do here is we'll go back to this. Because this is what's interesting, right? So this is what the mainstream narrative is. And it's like the lunar eclipse was just like that supposedly proves the Earth's a sphere. So people looked up, they saw a lunar eclipse, and they're like, oh, that means the Earth's a sphere. Like, obviously that means the Earth's a sphere casting a shadow onto the moon. That's proof positive, right? But like if you take two spheres and you move one sphere in front of the other one to cast a shadow on it, as it moves in front of the sphere it's casting a shadow on, it changes shape. It starts to distort. It starts to become like an oval. It takes like the S wave shape, like the sine wave shape. It stretches out and elongates because the shadow is moving over a curved surface, right? So there's obviously like the apex of the sphere. So it actually stretches out. You can do this yourself. You can take a sphere, as long as you move it across the face of another sphere, that shadow will actually stretch out. It won't just be a circle. So literally, the lunar eclipse cannot be because the Earth is a sphere casting a shadow on it. Literally, it can't be on its face. So, and the reason I bring that up is because when people say that they looked back in the day and they're like, oh, lunar eclipses, well, they're stupid and didn't understand basic things, and they could have just pulled two spheres out and tested it, but they didn't. And then the next thing they say is disappearance of ships over the horizon. Same thing, right? The time that we were told that they do this, like Jeran was talking about earlier, they didn't even have optics that could try to see the boat again. Because if they said, hey, you see that boat? Oh, it disappeared. We can't see the boat anymore. The only logical reason is that it's going over a sphere, as if you should be able to see forever or something if it was flat. I don't know. But then if you had been like, hey, buddy, check out these. They're called binoculars. And they would see the boat again. So their claimed evidence, because they say they proved it thousands of years ago, is stupid. It's not just not correct. It's not actual proof of the globe. It's stupid. It's literally and objectively wrong, inept, and stupid. And so why would the mainstream keep pushing that out as a time that they proved the Earth's a globe, right? Like that's the weird part. Different star constellations visible from different latitudes. Really, bro? Really? This is allegedly the top proofs of a globe. That when you get further away from the stars, they drop down in your field of view in the sky. And eventually you can't see them. You see other stars because you're moving under a different part of the sky. What? Like literally, in fact, to even get the very latitude system they're invoking, you assume the Earth is flat, and like you take angle measurements to Polaris, and you just keep going out back further and further and further from underneath Polaris with this giant horizontal baseline. We literally take these angles and then draw concentric circles based on those angles. And then so as you do that flat Earth measurement, you get so far away that eventually Polaris is beyond where you can reference it to make the next measurement. So that's obviously stupid. Again, this is actually stupid. This is like low IQ, stupid. The changing position of the sun at different locations. Same thing. We've already talked about that. It's not proof of heliocentrism. It's not proof of a sphere. The fact that the sun moves in the sky is if anything, it's evidence that the sun moves in the sky. And then we got observations from space.
Those are real.
Yeah, which we're not gonna.
We've talked about that. I mean, Himawari 8 and how everybody wants to tell us it's impossible that they could ever predict the clouds. Yet I've got my app here called Ventu Sky, which tells me what the clouds will be in 2 weeks, which makes a lot of sense, right? And so it would be very easy to send up, I don't know, maybe 1,000 balloons twice a day from 1,000 locations on Earth, and then to use that data to enter into a system that could then predict clouds for the next 12 hours, and then it returns the cloud data. So that would probably take a few minutes, though. I mean, the computer can't do that instantly. So what do you know? How does it feel that Himawari takes 25 to 35 minutes to get one image to the internet? It's 2024, by the way. And it takes 25 minutes, 35 minutes to get one image up, and then people are like, that's proof that the Earth's a sphere. Okay, geniuses. How could that be proof? Just real quick on this.
Now, especially, it's going to be a little more difficult because, for example, well, NASA has already the data center to climate, and they simulate a lot of that you can see, for example, in the Discovery images or videos when you can see few clouds that start morphing itself and start changing shapes. And that it's something that they pre-made and pre-render and then apply into the sphere, mapping sphere. I show that many times in the past. And then in the private chat, I just paid the link because now we are going to have the digital twins from Nvidia. They are simulating a copy of the Earth. It's called Welcome to Earth version 2. And they especially focus in this type of simulations, trying to simulate weather and climate. So a lot of people in the near future, they are going to see just simple animations, 3 animations, but it's going to maybe match a little bit more the sky that we see from the ground. And it's going to be more and more difficult to break the spell. And that's the complete. That is why I really love that we enter 10 years ago from now and start making this type of archive, sharing and saving a lot of videos, especially the old ones, because we're gonna need to use more often in the future to contrast the CGI, based by AI.
Yeah, that would be crazy if they actually do that. I don't know. That would be so crazy.
I paste the link if you want to open just for the people in the audience to take a look. Yeah, in the private chat here in the same application, in the same Talk Studio Streamlabs.
All right.
If you go up the right corner, top right corner, you can see that one. You have the animations. They give this presentation in the last World Forum of Computer Advance. It's like a Silicon Graphics World Conference. You have some animations, and they show you this twin Earth. But the idea behind is that I think I have here is okay. I paste another YouTube link from Nvidia YouTube channel, but this was 3 years ago. So here you can see, if you open the YouTube link, you can see how they remember this is 3 years ago, which things changed quite drastically from that moment in time. And there you can see how they put these weather conditions in the changing clouds, and this is all database for Doppler recompilations from the ground and stratospheric balloons and things like that. Of course, this is not real time. This is not something that they produce in one day, but that is just a matter of time and coordination, nothing more than that. So now in the twin Earth, they present and they start implementing the RTX technology via the Nvidia cards, and of course the maps on the spherical Earth is much believable and more realistic, because they are actually using photograph taken by planes, and they start to computing via BDBs, the cloud, so it's going to it's much realistic with depth, with thickness and things like that. So in a couple of years, it's going to be really difficult to convince people if you don't have all videos to at least present the narrative to convince them that they break the spell.
Yeah, because NASA is, I mean, you have to go back to the 70s to see some of the, garbage of NASA that you can tell is completely faked. But, anyway. Oh, just reading about this, I do recommend people read Anatoly Fomenko because it really will show you a lot about I guess they call it the telluric system of the sun and moon, but proving that wrong. It says the sun, Earth, moon telluric system became stable only after the 13th century. That is astronomically impossible, right? So before that, it's all screwed up because it's made up, and they made up things in a point in time where they didn't know it well enough that we know it now, that we're able to go back and add these things and figure out, oh shit, you guys are way off. This is talking about here. Long before AI, a group of mathematicians headed by Anatoly Fomenko made the same conclusion and started in 1972 in the elaboration of the theory of new chronology following the discovery by American astrophysicist Robert Russell Newton of an important parameter D in the crazy Earth-Moon telluric system. And the remedy of that theory is the new chronology. The problem with history being erroneous, even on an academic level, is that it is built in the 16th to 17th centuries on the potpourri chronology foundations laid by Scaliger and what is that guy's name? Petavius. The theory of the new chronology contains two parts, scientific and entertainment. The first one proves irrefutably on the basis of statistics, astronomy, and physics that the chronology of the world history is erroneous. My books are banned by the Russian Orthodox Church. The second part gives the readers the possibility to taste the chunks of reconstruction of history, not irrefutable as a way to relax from the difficulty of digesting the tables. Then it goes down and it just starts listing all of the lies. And they're everywhere. I mean, Michelangelo, I don't know if people know about that whole system where he actually faked a bust and sold it as being ancient, and it wasn't ancient. Then you've got Erasmus, a Catholic who's commonly held as one of the brightest Northern Renaissance scholars, forged a complete work and attributed it to Saint Cyprian, who lived some 1,200 years prior to the time of publication, proven to be a hoax. Proven this religious person faked a religious document. Leon Battista Alberti, executed the most successful literary forgery in the early Renaissance. He forged an ancient Roman tragic comedy printed about 150 years after its time by a printer who thought it to be an authentic creation from antiquity. And it just goes, this is in alphabetical order. Now we're at Annius, Dominican and the master of the Vatican at one point, is possibly the most famous forger of the 15th century. His forgeries, which revised large swaths of history, received support and opposition from some of the greatest of his time. It even gave way to more works based on his original forgery. There is also a known case of him forging an inscription made to appear as though it was from the 700s. Amerigo Vespucci, the man with North and South America are named after. The forger forged his travel narratives, published around the turn of the 16th century. At least that's what Freeman, the compiler of the most extensive library in the world containing works of literary forgeries, believes. Vespucci's letters, Arthur thinks, that are an academic fraud known as the Saldarini letter, led to the Americas being named after him in 1507. Others believe that the letter contained fictional accounts of that Vespucci did not write. And it's just talking about how even sometimes we blame the people and call them the forgers, but they might not even be real, right? Like the people who wrote the story about them or the people who faked the story about Vespucci, they're the ones who were wrong. Trithmestius, a German Benedictine abbot who has since been called the father of bibliography, could not resist the temptation of forging 1,000 years of history. He published a work in 1515 based on sources that did not exist. It would be as if we appealed to the authoritative book of the Slack to substantiate our narrative about the millennium's worth of names, places, events, knowing that the book of Slack did not exist. Antonio de Guevara goes on and on. Pravino, Ligorio. These are just all fabrications of history that have been proven by astrology, really, because the sky is a clock. And you can go back in time and figure out where things could have happened, where things should have happened, and they were able to determine that all these things are just made up. And that's pretty sad.
Yeah, and sorry, I don't want to change topic, but if you can but if you can open the last link that I put in the private chat, you can see the difference between the 40 years ago and now look at this. And this is, I bring this just for finalizing the idea, but here you can see all the visualizations are in the Omniverse simulation, which is free platform to render photorealistic, bring from the Nvidia servers. And if you take a look now when they go into from outside in the supposedly space, you can see this is a time lapse. And in fact, we never see this type of things from the ISS, right? In time lapse, the clouds never change in shape, or there are really, really tiny deformations in the clouds. But here you can see this is just a matter of adjusting some and tweaking some rendering settings of illumination. And then if you just use these type of things as a background, and then in the front you have the astronauts and some props, and it's going to be really much difficult to explain to the people that this is all CGI. Of course, they change to this type of other type of visualizations, trying to show, for example, weather in different colors and things like that. But if you just keep the idea of the first simulations at the beginning, you can see how much realism is going to achieve. And about Anatoly Fomenko, for me, it's a great information. In fact, we are in touch with one of his disciples, which is from Spain, not from Argentina, but actually from Spain. And we invited a few times to our radio show that we celebrate every Thursday. And we bring it, I think, 2 or 3 times to the radio show and to talk with him because he's Spanish, so we can talk about that. And I have a friend that he translates the series of Fomenko research, which are in Russian, of course, but with the uses of some AI and people that talks Russia. He translates, like, I don't know, maybe there are 30 hours of documentaries, and it's super interested what he presents, at least to.
I thought you'd like him anyway because he, who he blames for all this is the Jesuits.
Exactly, yeah. That is because why he's my friend, even he's a Russian.
Yeah, I mean, he says that the pyramids were built in somewhere between 1100 and 1400.
Yeah, and especially he talks about the polymerase technique because they found hair inside of the rocks. So he talks about that the build-up of the pyramids was just like in Spanish we call it cofrado, but it's like you make like the cage, and you start mixing rocks with some chemicals stuff, and then you have these giant blocks that appear to be solid rock. But he presented a little bit at alternatives, and at least for I think the other cage of the pyramid. But yeah, he presents another history about Jesus, not in terms of the symbolic, but in terms of maybe
a real person that
a real person that history take as an example, just that. And then of course the Jesuits and other start creating another story. But he presents a lot of information that is pretty important to at least take into account.
For sure. I mean, he talks about here it says the consensual world history is a finely woven magic fabric of intricate lies and events predating the 16th century. History is based not on originals, but on copies of copies of copies from references to and from and about. Not a single piece of evidence can be irrefutably and independently dated earlier than the 11th century. How about that? So to everybody who thinks we have books and we've got all these documents from long ago, they can't. There's no piece of evidence that can ever say that it's been dated before the 11th century. That's only 1,000 years ago. Radiocarbon and dendrochronological dating are manipulated by mainstream historians. It fits a lot of what I think makes sense when you look at the history, because it just doesn't jive. And the whole idea of the date of 0 never made sense to me. You would never take a time in the past and say, imagine if we just decided, let's call 1776 when the United States signed the Declaration of Independence. Let's call that 0. And we'll just start. And then people will be like, what are you talking about? Think of everything that would need to be done for us to assign a date 0, and then everybody change the dates after that. It would just destroy everything. And then you said, oh yeah, and on all the books that are already written in the libraries, can you go through those please and change the dates so that they match our new dating system? That'd be insane, but that's what was done. All the books have now been dated to our dating system, even though they didn't put a 0 to those dates until much after. It wasn't like they were going along. Jesus was born like, let's call now 0. They had a date back then. Well, what date did they call it? We don't even know that because they've changed all the books.
Yeah, well, he denounced Petavius and Scaliger as the main chief in terms of the rewrite history. Of course, they belong to the Jesuit order, and that has a lot of sense because they are behind education, history, books, burns of books, and that type of ideas, of course. And in the actual days, they just start rewriting the Wikipedia and start trying to use PDF because it's easily. I have a lot of links, for example, even with the Michelson Morley experiment that they change a lot of times. I'm not talking about the Jesuit. I'm talking about people that has credentials to do it. They change a lot of times after the flat Earth. A lot of, especially the paragraph that they talk about the both interpretations of the Michelson Morley experiment, but now they change it and they already give the people one interpretation, which is that the ether doesn't exist. So the history repeats itself, and the methods with it.
Yeah,
That's wild. That's wild. What'd you say? Can you repeat the guy you're talking about?
What? Sorry?
Repeat the name of the guy you guys are talking about.
Scaliger.
Scaliger and Petavius. That was the world history people. I'm sorry, the people that it's in the book of history that they say that they rewrite the books especially for the European people, and then of course they bring it to America. That is an official statement.
You know, it makes a lot of sense because if you were going to want to rewrite all the history to kind of manipulate what everyone else believes, you would definitely want to make sure that you kept the real history safe, right? You wouldn't want to just like completely rewrite and erase everything. You would want to have the real historical evidence, and of course, we know the Vatican does that very thing, right? So it does make a lot of sense that the Jesuits
And all these books that we're not allowed to see, right? That whole library full of books that are you can't see.
Exactly, and the problem is that time to time something in excavations or some strange place around the world, someone just hit a rock and break the rock, and there is a cave with new papers, and the institutions start getting crazy because oh man, we didn't get that, we didn't find the last corner when people just, for example, with the papyrus of the paper of the Dead Sea with the Enoch staff and things like that. There are things that they find it like 400 years later, so they cannot control that, and it must be a lot of those tiny things that escape from the control on the controllers.
And then Isaac Newton, right? Isaac Newton was against chronology. He wrote his own chronology, said that the one that we had was completely garbage. Do you have people in science to proclaim him as the greatest of all time? Do they ever mention that he changed all of chronology? No, they don't mention that. They don't mention that he never had sex either, but that's another story altogether. But the guy was a little bit nuts. The guy was a little bit nuts for sure.
Yeah, just to show you guys lifetime, this is Yandex. Go. Jesuits rewrite history. There you go. Original settlers, Jews found in America.
Wow.
Fallacies. It's just all over the place. Secret army of the papacy. Blah blah blah. And then I put Jesuits run the world. And how Jesuits use the Jews to disguise the fact they run the world. The hidden government that's run the world. Da, 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 da. The index is fire. Like literally, just put anything in here, and you're good to go.
What a twist of history that the United States people start using Google from Russia, right?
I know, and thank goodness for them, man. I'm all for it. What's so crazy is a lot of the documents that we have access to of the founding fathers, they talked pretty crazy about the Jesuits, and they said like that's the number one threat is the subversion and infiltration of Jesuits. Did you guys know that? And that you actually weren't even allowed to have a Catholic church in many states in the United States until like the mid to late 1800s.
They were a problem.
Yeah, they were literally banned. They were banned, bro. Though, and obviously we, even Jewish people were expelled. There was an expulsion by USS Grant, which most people don't know. But yeah, to me that was fascinating. Finding Thomas Jefferson talking about the Jesuit order and stuff. Have you guys ever read that? Like, I don't like. I'm obviously like I put a big question mark on all the history, but it's
Yeah, me too.
what I mean that if anything's gonna sound kind of legit, it would be like these quotes from these people early on that we were never told about and are hard to find that say, "Watch out for the Jesuits." Yeah.
This here says the British Encyclopedia names Joseph Scaliger as the founder of the consensual chronology. Protestant Kabbalist numerologist Scaliger had considered himself a great mathematician who solved the quadrature of the circle problem by making pi equals 3.16. I don't know. This discovery was laughed at by the French mathematician Vietier, who considered him to be the father of algebra. Scaliger's principal works, Opus Novum de something Temporanum, represents a vast array of dates produced without any justification whatsoever, containing the repeating sequences of dates with equal shifts, multiples of the major Kabbalistic numbers 333 and 360. Numerology was considered a major science then, and J.G. Scaliger was a prominent Kabbalist at the time. Neither him nor his follower Jesuit D. Petavius, clergy or humanist, paid much attention to Occam's razor when they crafted the Roman and Greek antiquity. Their clients were condottieri upstarts seeking legitimacy in the days of yore, who became popes and cardinals and formed these regal dynasties, such as the Medicis. They paid exceedingly well for a glorious but fictitious past being written for them. The English philosopher William Occam, from Occam's razor, said entities should not be multiplied beyond necessity. So, I mean, he was part of it. He knew what they were doing. Occam's razor applied to the history leaves us with a revision of humankind where civilization actually began somewhere around the 8th to 10th century. Think about that. The civilization started in the 8th to 10th century. So that just makes a lot more sense. You do the mathematics on population growth, and if you start in the year 800, we could easily be at 7 or 8 billion today without a problem, without question. In fact, you wouldn't even need much of a increase in the birth rate, maybe go from 1.2% to 1.8%, and we'll probably get there. And I've
ever looked into the fact that the world population is like a total scam, though?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, but I don't know what it would put at, what I would put it at, right? Could it be 4 billion? Could it be 2 billion? Could it be 10 billion? I don't, somewhere in there. But regardless, we can get to that number from a fairly recent date. We don't need to go back 300,000 years or whatever they want to say.
Yeah, for sure.
It's been here.
Yeah, I just like India and China, the way that it's all reported is so laughable. The numbers don't add up at all. Like the 8 to 9 billion number is totally doesn't check out. By the way, I was looking this up, Iri, when you brought it up, and it's so funny. Nvidia themselves has this. It says Earth 2 and Blue Marble 50th anniversary. How did we see the Earth 50 years ago? So it shows the blue marble.
Nice picture.
Yeah, then watch what it's about to do. It says, how do we see it now?
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Well, we see cartoons now?
we still see cartoons, yeah.
What does that check out? What's the point you're making?
Well, Nvidia is really beyond the symbol of the icon and beyond the name itself. He's really a partner of NASA, and I mean, you can check it from the partners of NASA. And remember that Nvidia was the company in charge of trying to debunk the debunkers of the moon landing based on the illumination of the suit of Buzz Aldrin in the supposedly super shadow area behind the lander. So, I mean, they are all in the same team. It's just that. And maybe, in fact, if the CEO of Nvidia, he always dressed in black. And maybe there is some Jesuit in Nvidia. That is my guess. Okay. But yeah, they are all behind the same logics.
Yeah, it's funny because the Jesuit thing is a rabbit hole, man. Because I'm just going back and forth, obviously, but the Jesuit thing is a trip because I mean, didn't they bring the globe Earth to China like relatively?
They actually took it everywhere because China was flat Earth until so was Japan until fairly recently when they started building all the observatories, but it was all done by Jesuits. They're the ones who went away. They were all the first astronomers or the first whatever you would call it. They started the first observations.
Father Ricci was the first Jesuit to take the worldview of the heliocentric, and in fact, it's not heliocentric; it's the Copernican doctrine, because that is the real name. They just camouflage, and every time that we only use heliocentric instead of heliocentric or the Copernican doctrine, we are just helping them to perpetuate the idea of a scientific thing, which is incorrect, because this is a doctrine from Copernicus. So it is a religious doctrine based on supposedly false science. But the Father Ricci was the guy who started taking the idea of the Copernican doctrine into China, and they are everywhere. I mean, the Jesuits are, for me, the guys behind the material world and the this idea of the heliocentric model, and the Jews are behind the quantum physics. So they are really work nice together. You can see, for example, in the Judeo-Christian religion, they are, have the Old Testament, and the Jesuit the New Testament. Then in science, one of the parties drive the quantum physics, with this idea of Kabbalah and these tiny balls and the dimensions and the parallel universe. Because in fact, I have a video of Rabin, a Jew Rabin. I don't know if Rabin is the correct word. Okay, talking about flat Earth, which is supposedly incorrect, and how the Torah give the fundamentals of simulation theory. And he started talking about how you can explain from the Torah and the Kabbalah why we live inside of simulation, for example. So the Jews is not strange that every surname that you find linked to science in terms of the Jews are behind the quantum physics. And the names behind the big balls, not the small balls, are from Jesuits. So they work together in all the paradigms, the economics, the politics, and the science and religions. That is my way of looking, right?
Yeah, and then like, dude, what's crazy is they named all the craters on the moon after Jesuits.
Well, man, we you know what? For example, I have a couple of friends that we create our own calendars, and we put days for the Gleason maps, and we put names, days, of things related with flat Earth, and we start naming our things and renaming, some of the ritual that we practice. I talk about ritual in terms of even a ceremony of family things or whatever, because we need to make the same tactics. We need to create our own worldview and trying to use, for example, in America and Europe, there was a time that they don't allow you to put strange, quote unquote, names, because they need to use all biblical names, because it was a method of propaganda. And if you go to Spain or Portugal or things like that, that are called Mario, Maria, Joseph, William, because it's a way of perpetuate and remember names that are belong or link with biblical stories. So we need to start doing the same thing. I mean, we should present like a map of the moon with names of real scientists, flat earthers, and Eric Dollar crater, the Tesla crater, things like that.
Yeah, Oliver Heaviside, Charles Porter Steinmetz, Walter Russell.
Exactly. And we need to create a calendar celebrating those type of people, and just it's a nice idea for Dave to give away for free on the app, for example, and download the new calendar with the new names, with new celebrations on the year and things like that.
I like the idea. I like the Walter Russell Day.
And after all, it's a new excuse to celebrate together, things like that. You can say to your boss, man, tomorrow I'm not going to work because, Jews has the Sabbath day. Well, we celebrate the Walter Russell Day, and for my community, it's very important, so I cannot do the job. And it's my religion, and you cannot say nothing because we are free religion in the United States.
For my community is very important.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man,
man.
we need to do it.
It is crazy. It is all crazy. Like the names of the months, the days we celebrate, the holidays, the holidays, the esoteric meaning behind them, the planets names and the missions they claim NASA's doing and the rockets and the satellites and even the craters, and it's like all so overtly weird and like no one thinks anything of it. Like, yeah, we just name everything after Greek gods, no big deal.
Well, but
Babylonian
that
and Greek deities.
yeah, because name is not just putting names in terms of something mechanical. Remember that in the Bible, for example, when you know uh, God created the world and the people and said, "Okay, go there and spread and have child between each other and name things." I cannot say especially in English because I cannot remember the biblical phrase, but it gives the command to name things,
Yeah.
to order things. So putting names is not just naming things, it has a lot of intrinsic power. When you name things, you give identity, you create reality. That is why they use their own names. And that is why NASA keeps naming as the old Egyptian and Sumerian stuff.
Crazy, yeah, and dude, I won't even open up this can of worms fully, but I recently saw a video from Elon talking to Jordan Peterson, and randomly he talks about how Memphis was the capital of ancient Egypt.
Hmm.
And then he says, who knows, maybe our next god is going to come from there. And then starts laughing. And Peterson's like all awkward and has no idea what he's talking about, but is like laughing anyway because he's a meth head. And then says like, I wish that wasn't funny. And then Elon like laughs and repeats him. So isn't that weird? Am I the only one that thinks that's super weird? Like, what is he talking about? Like, our next god's gonna come from there? Weird.
Yeah, I remember that Elon Musk has their own school called Ad Astra, and we have a lot. Well, we have not. You can find it here on Yandex or Google, whatever. He drew how many times he put cloth with the Illuminati sign in the back and the New World Order phrase, and he dressed like a pope in a couple of party. Then they used the Baphomet. Type of sky phrase. I don't know how to say in English. I mean, the guy is, at least for me, he's a complete idiot. How he talk. I cannot hear more than 2 minutes, but something. I believe he knows something. And if you put Ad Astra Elon Musk right now on Yandex, you're gonna find a BBC article talking about how disconformed he was with the traditional education. So he creates a school for his children and other children, but is surrounded by a halo of mystery and secretism because you cannot enter as a press to take pictures or know what is the type of knowledge that they are giving to the child and things like that. So I believe that the educational system was great, man, and then these people create his own educational system, and of course they maybe give things like trivium and quadrivium information or this type of things to control themselves and control to others, of course.
I did not even know about this. Yeah, it's all very weird, man. And then you look into the WikiLeaks, Hillary Clinton emails, or someone's, emailing her, what's up with Gilgamesh? Where did they find him and where's his body at now? And now they're saying, oh, they've discovered a new chamber in the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, even though like the biggest pyramid in the world is actually North America and it has more pyramids ever. They just like Egypt, they point over there. That idea that it was recently built is actually very interesting because all of Egyptology is a lie. King Tut's quote unquote DNA doesn't match the modern Egyptians at all. we're clearly just lied to about that, and we're told to look at Giza over and over, but we're never told to look here in North America. And if you look at like pre 1910, even history textbooks in America said there was an ancient advanced civilization in the Americas prior to the North Americans. I mean, the Native Americans. So, like that, like in the United States, textbooks said that there was an advanced ancient civilization in the Americas prior to the Native Americans. Like that's wild. Yeah, like isn't that crazy? It seems like
Well, yeah, have you ever heard of the Sage Wall in Montana? I never heard about this until like last year.
no.
Huge monolithic walls that run parallel to each other. Giant stones stacked up on top of each other, stacked perfectly. And they call it a natural formation. That's their only thing they can say. Yeah, check that out. Northern Montana, it even runs up into Canada some. Huge, huge, miles and miles and miles long. And they say it's a natural structure. That's all they can say. Who was here, right? Nobody was here advanced ever.
Yeah, what's so weird is supposedly they brought the Gilgamesh thing to Tennessee, and some speculate like Fort Knox and stuff like that. And then Elon Musk actually has a huge AI data center in Memphis, Tennessee. And it's like, dude, why'd they choose America for the new world? And why'd they completely remove the history of its old world? And what did we find in the Grand Canyon? And why do they call that Egyptian? How's it Egyptian? It's in America, bro. What are you talking about? Anything that looks like a pharaoh or has any similar symbology, they say, oh, it's Egypt. Like, Egypt's a deception, as far as I can tell, right? Like,
Oh yeah,
yeah, it's a cover story. It's a cover
For
story
sure.
to deflect.
they're able to see that the pyramids that were built used the Fibonacci sequence, which wasn't discovered until around 1300. So the pyramids couldn't have been built before 1300 because nobody had ever actually discovered the proportions that there was no mention of it. So you can't just have magically these guys just built pyramids 5,000 years ago with all these proportions perfectly that are never mentioned again until Fibonacci comes around in 1300. And then that sequence of numbers, which we now call the Fibonacci numbers, then it started to be applied to architecture. So you can actually tell, you go to any old ancient building, if it does have the Fibonacci sequence in it, then you know it's before 1300, which there's very few. If it does, then it's post 1300. It's pretty easy to see where they're coming up with these ideas. And it does make sense. It's like the whole, I'm sure you've heard before that we couldn't draw in perspective. So they have this whole narrative that like art was really bad until the Renaissance, and then humans realized how to draw in perspective, which is just stupid because obviously we see in perspective. So nobody was drawing stupid pictures of large Jesus standing in front of buildings that he's smaller than, and it's all fabricated, and there's no way that they would have done it. And then all of a sudden people are like, oh, perspective, okay, we get it now with the math and everything. It's like, no, that's the way we see
With the math and everything.
People just would have drawn in perspective. So it's just they've constructed a timeline that doesn't make sense, and yet they sell it as, if you don't repeat this and believe it, that you're an idiot. And if you go to school and you get a paper that says you're smart, well, you learn the history that they set up for you. And so it's actually brilliantly done, really. And then if you really think about when most of these new things came, we're talking about like 100 years. This is why one of the things I've heard recently is that, well, Jeran, you're going to go down there and see the 24-hour sun because these ancient or these former flat earthers, Lady Blount and Robotham and them, they believed in a 24-hour sun. And it's like, no, you're talking about, first of all, this was the late 1800s you're talking about. So nobody had even been to Antarctica yet, really. Maybe Cook Cook just said that he couldn't find it. There was no southern continent. And then you figure they didn't actually get up onto the continent and start walking on it supposedly until the early 1900s. So if Robotham and Lady Blount agreed that there's a 24-hour sun, they're just like you guys. And what it's called is you backed down. You let the heliocentrists, because they're so confident in their model, you let them convince you, just like they convinced Robotham and just like they convinced Lady Blount, that there is a 24-hour sun. And that's just, it's sad that this is what's happening, is that, and that's what happened to them. They never saw, do you know Robotham, Lady Blount, Mercator, who's the guy, Gleason, Ferguson, all those guys never went below the equator ever. So you don't want to take their word for it because they never went below the equator. So a lot of these were just guesses, and you have to figure they already knew the layout of the globe before they'd ever went anywhere. They had already decided that it was a globe. They had already decided to make the longitude, latitude lines. So everything was decided before they went there. And then we know that they went there, and what happened? They were off all the time. Captain Cook's off 18 miles a day, never can figure out what's going on. We've got, who's his name? Taboo Conspiracy has a video where the guy who's racing in the Vendée Globe claims that they just make left turns the whole time. Well, think about a globe. Think about going east in a boat. Do you make left turns or do you make right turns to get around the Earth? You would make right turns. But they made left turns the whole time. Well, think of the AE map. Now, if you're going east and you're going to go around the Earth, what do you make? Left turns or right turns? So everything leads you to realize that what we're dealing with is a bunch of liars, and you shouldn't believe them. You shouldn't trust them. Stop trusting things that you just hear, because it's a narrative that's being told. And it certainly seems, let me give an example. So if they did realize, let's say in 1900, somebody said, hey, there is a 24-hour sun. You stupid flat earthers, it's 24-hour sun in the south, so therefore Earth can't be flat. Well, if that was the case, then the very first chance they got to put cameras down there, anything they could do to prove their globe Earth, they would. But they still haven't. They still are cutting every single South Pole webcam that there ever was. So what is the reason for that? Why wouldn't you just show what is so-called proof of the globe Earth? They never did. Why are there no undersea cables in the south? What all these things came after, right? So they had every opportunity to prove what people are saying was proof, but they never did it. And there's a reason why, because they can't. And so stop letting them convince you of things just because it needs to be so in their model. And that's what I think people are missing, is that there's just not another idea. If the Earth was a globe, like they say, then there would be things that we could actually see that would prove that. And they don't have those. They have, things like GPS, which I've said before. As soon as you get that, you can step back and say, oh, okay, now we can relax, because how are these guys going to prove that the distance of the ocean is different? Well, we can show you boats that supposedly should be going 30 knots and they win world records and go around the Earth in 100 days. But you do the math and it comes out that they were doing 8 miles an hour, but the boat does 35 miles per hour. So how is that possible? Well, you just have to believe it. You just got to suck it up and believe these stories that you're told, even though they don't match with what we know should match. I just heard this thing recently. Oh, they knew in the ancient days that there was a 24-hour sun in the south. How did they know that? Who was out traveling the Southern Ocean besides Cook in 1770? I mean, people don't go for pleasure cruises when there's no GPS. You don't just go south and go cruise around down there and report back do you realize what you're talking about, how difficult that would be? But people just act like, well, it just happened. Even though we didn't even get up onto the continent of Antarctica until 100 years ago, supposedly. Again, that's based on the history that we're told, so who knows how right that is. But everything. There's Da Vinci multiplied in history. There's Leonardo de Pisa. There's Leonardo Pisano Bigolio. There's Leonardo Fibonacci. They're all people under those different names, but they all have the same story. But do you know that the idea of the decimal system of numbers and the numbers 0 through 9, that those came in like 1250 AD? So we have all this story that the dates, and we got all these math, and there's great. Aristophanes used angles, and we didn't even have the numbers 0 through 9 and decimals until 1250. So before that, they were using Roman numerals, and we're supposed to believe that they were, they get angles and all the, okay, whatever you say. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make sense. That's the moral of the story.
No, the hexagonal, how you pronounce in English? Hexamal. The base of 60, yeah. Based on 60.
Well, that's 60 is supposed to be easier, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's in, at least it's in harmony with the cosmos, with the sky, with the angles, and
right. 360. It's
exactly.
Right, all the way out.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, those guys can do math way bigger than the math that we can do, quicker, because it's all works out with the 60. I don't know the numbers myself, obviously, but you can actually get really big numbers and then really quickly get back down. The math is easy, whereas the math that we're given is a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, and another nice of history, for example, the Pythagorean method of the triangles, it not came from Greeks. It's belonged to Sumerians. There is in the rocks, in the tablet of Sumerians, the first Pythagorean theorem, for example. And in terms of history, they say, yes, and they repeated that supposedly Pythagoras was the first guy to came out with this nice and very clever idea of how you can use triangles to make all this kind of stuff. And in fact, there was from the Sumerians, there is the Pythagoras theorem
Yeah,
in the rock.
right. Because if they knew those, they would have already known those. And Babylonians,
Mhm.
right? And they
Yeah.
kind of stole that. Yeah. So I don't. Yeah, I mean, I think Egypt is definitely a deception. It's not ancient. And the Dark Ages were completely invented. There's no such thing. I mean, just think of humans anyway. Like they're always wanting to do something. They wanted to grow. They wanted to expand. They want to learn. They want to discover. But we're told from 800 till 1600 or 1400 that humans just didn't do anything. They basically were basically went backwards. Like nobody did anything. Nobody cared about inventing anything. Nobody cared about promoting the species or anything. They were just a bunch of losers, I guess. But it's just an invented timeline. It doesn't exist. And they just added it. And you can see that they repeated stories from the past. So stories that happened before that, they would just repeat as if they happened again, changing people's names a little bit. It's not even like, and we think that there's like all this documentation. But again, remember the Library of Alexandria burned down all the world's history. Because we're so smart, we sent it to one library and it burned down, and it burned for 6 months. I mean, that's just, that's my favorite story in the world. 6 months of burning, just the agony. I don't think they discovered that water puts out fire yet, obviously, because they just let it burn all the books, all the knowledge.
No, but the sand is going to be more appropriate. You have a lot of sand surrounding I imagine, the library. So you can take sand and start, but yeah, there is, because after all, they are just, they treat the people as a child all the time with them, a bunch of random stories, and they program us from the
You
birth.
don't even know what we went through in the United States. We were taught that our country was the best that there is. We are the ones spreading democracy around the world. We are the saviors. In fact, we just were, and it's the opposite. We're installing governments that will agree with our totalitarian demands, and will only act within what the CIA demands that they act like. And yeah, I mean, that's just crazy that you end up finding out, wait, it was the opposite. I mean, think of the stories of like, oh, I got to ask you guys this, and I've been talking about it on my show for a week or two, and I'm not getting a good answer. Also, I want you to think about this one. So we're told the story about the Indians, the Native Americans that lived here. Here comes the Europeans. They come over. They start pushing them to the west. We're killing them in massive amounts. We have, all these wars, and we're taking their bison and killing them so they can't. But then we're told the story that at some point we gave them sovereign status and gave them land in our territory, and then let them live without laws and let them have casinos and all kinds of things. What sense does that make? If the United States was going to go to some country and take over that country, they're not going to get to the end of the people when there's like 100 people left and be like, all right, now what we're going to do is give you land. Well, first of all, that's even different because I'm talking about them going over there. Let's pretend there's some country that's in ours that is messing around. We're like, oh, we got to get rid of these people. We got to get them off the continent of the United States. But then when there's like 100 of them left, we say, you know what? As a reward for us just killing the rest of your people, we're going to give you this land now, and you don't have to follow our laws, and you're sovereign. I mean, it makes no sense. The only thing I can think of is that the Native Americans around today actually, or the ones that were around at the time, worked with the United States government to get rid of their brethren. They stabbed their brethren in the back. It was some sort of a deal where, hey, we'll get rid of these Indians if you give us this land and let us live here and not follow your laws. It's the only thing that makes any sense. There's no other way that the United States would just leave people on their own land and say, yeah, you're sovereign now. It's like you just killed all those Indians. You just destroyed all of them. Why would you leave this group, this small little group, and then give them sovereignty? They didn't have guns. If the United States wanted to, they could just kill them all. So there had to be some sort of deal made at some point in the past, because the story that we're told about the Native Americans make no sense. Why would they be allowed on the American land right now to live there and to have casinos and not have to follow our laws and to be sovereign?
And remember that the Jesuit was the moment in time where Hollywood was created. Not Hollywood as we know today, but the Jesuit was the guys behind creating on the propaganda with movies in the Wild Wild West to educate people to not accept the Indians. That is where the not cinematography. Well, yes, the movie makers start scripted things and uses to control the narrative and change the public opinion about the Indians.
Aren't they embarrassed though? Like they used to be, about the nature and the river god and the sun god and about community, and now they're about gambling. and
Well,
taking your
because they
money.
use alcohol to destroy their own people.
Right, that's what I mean. Okay.
Argentina was the same thing. They are start saying, okay, it's more cheaper and more effective not kill with bullets because we put all the people against us, and we already done the annihilations in terms of Chuck Norris. Now it's more cheapest and more effective that if we start provided alcohol and give and the Indians in
and
America.
dumb them down.
Yeah, and then South America we had a lot of books talking about the taverns and bars and things like that to destroy because the Indian was really addicted to the alcohol, and they are start perverting the society in a short period of time, like 40 years, things like that. And well, that was another tactic. I am not saying that is the only tactic, but it's
Right.
really effective to give gambling and things like that. In Argentina at that time, we don't even have money to create casinos, but you guys has a lot of money from other countries, so you can even go a layer up, not just alcohol, but alcohol, casino, women's, dogs, whatever you want.
And then what about like people think America's great. I mean, we actually just came and just destroyed Mexico. Mexico this is Mexican land where I'm at, Arizona, California, New Mexico, Texas. They're all part of Mexico. And they would have remained so if it not for the United States basically lying and telling a completely false story to the American public, which was that they were attacking us. It wasn't the case. We went into their land, started attacking them, then told a story to the nation that, hey, these guys are attacking our cities. And then the country went behind them and said, yeah, rah, rah, let's go get all these Mexicans. But it was us who was attacking Mexico. We went into their land and started to do shit. And then we just killed them. And everyone tells the story now today that like, oh, this is our land, America. No, we actually are an imperialist dictatorship that went in there.
Well,
and said,
yeah, because you are under the umbrella of British people, and we are under the umbrella of Spain people. That is why we have a lot of more communion with we not create, but for example in South America, the Jesuit, beside all that stuff that they made, they not the Jesuit, but the Spain government, they allow to have marriage with local people, and that we call mestizos, which is like a mestizo mix, and we start having like a new layers of society. And that even in the music, for example, we in the South has a lot of happy music because the histories tell that at that time the owners of the slave people, there was more open heart, and they don't mind if the Africans and Indians start playing songs for celebrating his calendar days. But in United States, you have blues and all this sad music because the British people, they don't allow to have happiness in there with slaves, so they start cutting the hands and things like that. If some of these terratenientes, or how you say, I don't know, but this owner of the slave people started hearing music at night and things like that. So there is a real thing that you can detect in the culture of any country, from Mexico to Argentina. We all speak the same language. The British with the Balkanization to break up the empire of Spain, and there is a lot of things in that. And we also have, for example, a writer, an author that is from Uruguay that wrote a lot of things about imperialism and things like that. And he proposed like why United States has the partner of defense that. Because they never receive an attack. The only attack that United States, that it must be called Department of Attack. No,
wait, 9/11 though, we had to attack.
Well, yeah, supposedly 9/11 and Pancho Villa.
Oh yeah,
Pancho Villa, was the only time
they told the story too. Remember, like
Mexico enter, take some shotguns and get back to Mexico. That was the only invasion of real foreign people into the territory, because even in the 9/11. The terrorists killed themselves, so they never put their leg on the land.
True. But it's like the Battle of the Alamo is one that people think like, what is that about? Like, people don't even realize they think that that's something pro. I mean, basically, the United States is just totally hypocritical in the fact that they're taking over Mexico's land, killing their people. They sold a false story to the American people that the Mexicans that attacked the United States. They had not. And then we then have some story that we have to go defend Europe against the invasions of Germany and the Soviet Union. What do you mean? Why are we? So we're going to a war to protect. We're going to defend Europe against these invasions by Germany and the Soviet Union. But we had just been guilty years before that of completely destroying the Mexican people and getting them out of our country, or getting them out of their country, making it ours. It's like such a joke. Like, are you okay with it, or are you not? Where does that end? I don't think there's anywhere that it ends. It's that line of militaristic reasoning, one that's held by even policymakers today, is like a slippery slope. You must adhere to some moral code or social contract of behavior, and they don't. They don't. We don't.
I think I have an official answer for you though. So like I know that like you got the War of 1812, right? And then from my understanding, like a lot of the Native American tribes were allying with Britain. So we were like fighting Britain, but they were like using the Native Americans and teaching them about guns and giving them weapons, and they had like tactical positioning and knowledge of the land and stuff like that. And I think that supposedly only lasted like 2-3 years or whatever. And then I'm not positive about all the dates and stuff, but I think it's like 1830s. You have like President Jackson give them land. Is that right? Like there was like there was some act where we divided land and gave some of the Indian tribes land. And so I'm just saying it's
why? Because they were. What would we have done that for?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Good question. I guess the official answer would be that it's a little bit more nuanced than just they could have eliminated them all. There actually was some pushback. It wasn't this like cakewalk where they just destroyed them, and then like in the early 1800s they even teamed up with Britain. And
just think of how many people there are now. Where you would think that they would have multiplied, but they're in tiny little locations, tiny little swaths of land that we gave them. Tiny. Like it just doesn't make sense that you would ever have a country that would give another.
They gave them like very undesirable land. So it's like
why would you give them any land.
Because that's what I'm trying to say. Like at one point, if they're so spread out, because like it wasn't like they had a monolith of agreement, which goes to say they're even easier to take over. They like the tribes fought each other. They like the idea that they were savage isn't completely unfounded. Like they killed each other a lot, so they weren't like all on this unified front against America. So in a way, that's beneficial because obviously your enemy's not like a unified front. They're not very strong. At the same time, it's kind of tricky because they're not all working together. You're gonna have to go individually track down each tribe. They're spread out all over the place. And some of the place wasn't desirable, so it took way longer than would have been preferred, right? Especially when they start messing with Britain and Britain's helping them. So as far as I would say, like the official answer, it would be like logistically just worth giving them undesirable land after so many decades of fighting them spread out all over the place because like who cares, right? We've got what we want.
Yeah, I think that they won, so they kind of felt like it would have been bad for business if you.
That's another part of it. That's another.
If you considered slaughtering them in California when there was people here, because I think there's some crazy number of murders that happened in California in the early 1900s, maybe it was late 1800s. But they reduced the population, and then people were pissed about it, and then they kind of, so you kind of have to stop because it's looking bad on you.
Yeah, that's another part of it, right? Because if you realize, like, this whole narrative's always run about the slaves, white people bad, slaves, but white people ended slavery, and it was really Britain. Britain did that, and like ended slavery for the whole world. Like actually went into like certain tribes in Africa and told them to stop enslaving each other, and this is well documented even in Africa. So. I mean, this whole notion that like white people were bad and did slavery, it's like, well, slavery is bad. Everyone did it. White people ended it. That's actually what happened. So there was like this shift over to this kind of like moral type of, it was like a moral shift.
What do you think it says in the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution? Why do you think it says all men are created equal if they had slaves at the time?
The way they got around it was they said they weren't men. I mean, good question. It's insane. But I guess what I'm saying is so once America really started building up, we started doing international deals with people. We started having like international relationships. So at that point, we were getting moral pressures from people that we were doing business with. And it's funny because this is actually true as far as I know. Trump highlighted this in the Rogan thing, and I think it's true, is that we used to make all our money with tariffs. And so, like, your international agreements were like the lifeblood of America, and the innovation and the production of America was like really sought after. So everyone wanted deals with us, and you would charge them tariffs. What they ended up doing was knocking all these tariffs down because these international bankers wanted to make way more money without paying tariffs, or because really it's just that the goods are so expensive that it's not worth bringing them in here. And then they gave us income tax. But what I'm saying is, if you were getting like this international moral pressure and you had to keep up a certain image and like it's starting to shift over, at one point, I do actually see where at one point you just be like, okay, we got what we want. It's not worth it. Like, it's not worth all the headache. It's not worth all the pressure back. It's not worth certain countries saying they're not going to keep working with us. It's just going to be a bad look if we literally genocide these people. So, and you see how it worked, right? They gave us the narrative that there was some like benevolent intention and that they gave these people land of sovereignty. Like, dude, they gave them the least desirable places in the world and put them on welfare, and now they're like, drink themselves to death, you know?
Yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense. That makes a little bit of sense because it's more like a pity prize. Here you go.
And like, it's like safe face last minute, you know?
Right. Because if no Indians existed today, we would all be talking about, like, remember when we killed all the Indians? So we don't talk about that. We're like, oh yeah, we killed some, but then we.
Yeah, basically, it's like a girl slept with 300 people, but then she got married at the end. You know, you know what I'm saying? It's like it's like a save face. It's a PR stunt. But I'm well on the train that those people were not the first ones here at all, and it explains how like non-advanced they were. They had advanced understandings of a lot of things, metaphysical and even spiritual, in my opinion. And there were
they didn't have any books, huh? No books at all.
Not really. Like, a few things were engraved in stone here and there, and there are some like shockingly Aramaic Hebrew found in America that no one's like they don't tell us about. And according to the way that they date things, it's like goes back as far as 2700 BC and all this stuff. But basically, there's a rich history in the United States, and we're just told from like Native American on, you know, like that's all we're told, and we're told that, like what you said, like they didn't really have any record keeping, so we just came in and kind of had to do it for them. But again, as early or as recent as the 1900s, early 1900s, encyclopedias and textbooks said there was an advanced ancient civilization and the remains were found here, and it was well known and established that there was a civilization prior to the Native Americans in the U.S. How insane is that? If you tell someone that right now, they'll like laugh at you. They'll call you a conspiracy theorist. If you tell someone that there used to be giants, they'll laugh at you. But you have all the early 1900 newspapers saying that there were giants. You have Abraham Lincoln saying, "Our eyes are gazing upon the same mountains that the eyes of giants once gazed upon it." So these things were like well known and accepted, and then just in a handful of decades, they've been able to completely rewrite everything. And then I'll stop ranting here. But the last thing is, like, they obviously now that's expedited, where they can literally erase things overnight. And book burning is done by the form of taking down domains. So we're kind of, imagine if it's been this bad and just like the development of the printing press really becoming more efficient pretty recently, and people still in tune with their ancestry and stuff, and it just took them like 5, 6, 7 decades to completely rewrite everything from history to cosmology to health. And like, what's it going to be like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, where they're rewriting things live? I don't think people realize how important. And like, last thing I'll say about this, dude, how far back can you go with your ancestry? Because I'm trying to track my ancestry, and like,
I can't go back at all.
Dude, like my immediate ancestors, they didn't even do anything. They did, like, they just left me hanging. So now I'm trying to like piece everything together the best I can. I get back to like my great great grandfather born in Hamburg, Germany, and then immigrated over here, and then had a son who ends up being drafted to forced to go fight against Germans, which is wild.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, but that's like as far as I can go back. I can't even go back further than just my great great grandfather. And so like that's where they're really getting us. No one's in tune with their ancestry. How are we going to know what really happened in history? We don't even know.
A lot of us
it was.
we were part of the orphan trains or something because it just doesn't go back far enough.
Yeah, it's all very weird. It's like and then think about it too though. Where do they house these records? Everything that I'm able to piece together from my family tree, because I've been kind of doing it in my spare time as a project, it's all military or government records.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like all a government has to do is like delete records.
That's another thing that just pisses me off is these globers saying, demanding all these things from flat earthers, but failing to recognize that everything that they think that they discovered, like Toon has never discovered anything or figured out anything. He's just repeated what he was taught. And there's this, he doesn't realize that everything that they discovered or mapped or explored was done through government money. And huge government money, and then also using your children through the military and drafts to basically do all the work for them. So to a demand of a flat earther to provide something where you're like, hold on a second, I'm one guy in my house, and yet your entire story is made up by hundreds of the best mathematicians of all time who could have been forced to make up whatever story they want. Just like I always say, the earth could be flat. You could then teach them to map that onto a sphere. And then all of a sudden you just convince people that they live on the sphere, but it's a projection. And then they go, oh, well, the AE map is a projection of the, well, if that was the original map, then the globe is the projection. And they just they can't grasp that. They can't grasp that that's how things would work. And that we can't, I mean, how are we put under the same scrutiny of somebody who took 400 years to craft their math, to craft their story, and used nothing but government money? It's crazy. I mean, it's our money. and it's the same thing with NASA that pisses me off. I mean, it's just like, that's our money. If I'm in charge of NASA, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show a 24-hour video of the earth that we live on, because you guys pay my salary. Every dollar I've ever spent came from you guys. So therefore I should probably provide you with a 24/7 view of the earth. They don't do that. Nope, sorry, we can't do that because it's on the night side of Earth and the ISS. And is it all these stories that just don't jive at all? And they're like, they have better things to do than to convince you flat earthers that, well, not really. They don't have better things to do. If there's a narrative out there, which NASA has clearly seen, that people are saying the earth is flat, if you could just come out and prove it, you would. They're wrong. You wouldn't just let it happen, let it keep growing, let people keep
Dude,
talking.
I just Googled proofs the Earth's a globe, and it says provide ample evidence that the Earth's shape is spherical, not flat. It's like I didn't ask you anything about flat.
Oh, I love when they say that too. Anytime you find an article that talks about the shape of the Earth, they will always say, and of course we know, of course the Earth's a sphere. Of course we've known for. They always have to throw that in. It's like so obvious. And then they'll say, some people think the Earth's flat. In parentheses, it's not. Exclamation point.
Yeah, it's like it's obvious that they actually feel the need to address it.
Right. And then there's a reason why. I mean, if you've gotten into this line of research, you should come to the conclusion. Now, again, Toon and FTFE and these characters, Simon Dan will never admit this, but you will come to the realization that, oh, there's more to this than I thought. Just leave it at that. And that should tell you, wait, why were we taught that this idea is the stupidest idea there ever was? Oh, you're some sort of flat earther. It has to be billed as the stupidest idea ever. But then you look into it, you're like, wait, it has a lot of merit. That alone should make you go, this is weird. Why would we take an idea that has some merit? If it's just wrong, then just show the proof that it's wrong. Show the evidence that it's not correct. But they don't do that. They just skipped over it in class, by the way. Did you ever have a day where they're like, this side of the class go and try and prove flat earth, and this side go? No, they just skip right over it. Because
that's why I'm trying to work on homeschool. I don't think people realize how much goes into that, though.
That's a lot.
But no, they didn't, and you know that's why we're not going anywhere. I try to explain it to Duffy. I'm like, I'm telling you, I'm just going to be standing right here at the end of the day, bro, because all the people that are trying to fight against me, and I try to listen to them in good faith, I can argue better than they can, and they are all dishonest, and they don't address that we're here for a reason, and it's not just that we're retarded or something. It's that there is such an overwhelming preponderance of evidence that the mainstream model is a lie, and we're actually being deceived. And you guys ignore all of it, lie about all of it, omit all of it. It's just a fact. And, you know.
Yeah, that's why I say if there's, I mean, if it's the worst thing I can imagine is it's some huge psyop and I don't really understand it. But that's the only thing I can imagine, because there's just no way you wouldn't execute some of these things if it's, you know, so obvious that there's a 24-hour sun. It's so there every day, every year. You got to be kidding me that we don't have any evidence of it in this long. I mean, think of how long
it's just with or without the 24-hour sun, man. Like if you go in stages, right? It's like geocentrism is such a major deception. Like whether or not it is geocentric aside, like whether or not it is aside, whether or not it's flat aside, like the way that we were lied to about it, the way that it was removed from us, the information that you have to look at to even try to make a decision. That's what's wild. That's what's important, right? Like that isn't going anywhere. You know what I'm saying? And like
they wouldn't have to lie about Michael Somorley. They wouldn't have to lie about all these things unless there was a reason. You just wouldn't have to do it. And why the narrative has to be the lie, and then why we have to have guys backing it up, which is even more ridiculous. I mean, just all I want is honesty. Like if I'm showing Himawari and I say, well, this can't be proof of the globe, because clearly it takes them 35 minutes and we can clearly get cloud data in that amount of time, and we could clearly put that up and call that. All I want is people to say, yeah, that's true, right? Just be a heliocentrist. I don't care. Believe in the globe. I don't give a shit. But just, can we agree on truths? Can we agree that the Himawari can't be proof of the Earth being a globe? It's easily faked. And they're like, they can't say that. They can't even say, oh, you're right, we could fake him. They believe that we're talking to crafts 14 billion miles away in space. They believe we have a remote control car on Mars and it's driving around from Earth with some 30-minute delay. That it landed there on a parachute with no air. They believe that. But when you tell them, I think they're faking this Himawari image. What? How dare you? They cannot fake that. Do you know how many supercomputers that would take? It's like, you stupid idiots. Just be smart enough and be honest enough to say, oh yeah, well, that's not evidence. It's just a picture on a screen, Jeran. Just a picture on a screen that, yeah, they could draw the map up just like Paul on the plane showed you and showed you they have a back room of files that just are placed over the globe and then called real pictures. We've shown you that. So just drop it and admit, oh yeah, you guys are right on that. No, they cannot admit one thing. They cannot concede one point. That's why the most shocking day of my life was when FTFE, and he had to concede because I think his own people were telling to, when he finally conceded that East and West are circles. Because he couldn't get that. He couldn't grasp it. And that's the only thing I've ever seen them concede. Ever. They won't even concede that you can't take an image and condense it and show curvature. Even though you can go find any straight line, take a picture of it, condense it, show curvature, and then say, see, if I can do that, then we can't use this as evidence anymore. They'll argue with you. No, but sometimes it'll show the curve. No, listen, I just took a picture of a known horizontal line, squished it, and got curved. Therefore, all that evidence is dismissed. Nope, they keep using it. Keep using it.
Yeah, there's the same people that'll say like Kepler's laws and retrograde and parallax and the fact the sun moves and like they say everything. They don't like concede on anything. And so it's just like
they won't even talk about like Aries failure or anything.
Yo, yeah, Aries failure is just a freaking death blow. That's
and
why
they can't talk
completely
about it.
removed. Yeah, at least they tried to cover him in backs. They had to because it created relativity, but they don't even like, dude. They just omit Aries failure because they can't even. There wasn't even a relativity for that one. They didn't even come up with something.
What do they say about the cosmic microwave background? It must be some sort of mistake or something. Is that what they're?
Yeah, they say it's just a mistake. And then the most recent and accepted one is that it's a misinterpretation of the data because the data is from where the data is taken. There's something that happens that makes it look like we're in the center, but it's just based on where the probes, like the local data set. So it's like a misinterpretation of the data based on it being locally observed or something.
But they do use that for the age of the universe.
Oh, for everything else. Yeah. Yeah.
And then the history or the story behind that is that supposedly this Pennes and Wilson, they discovered because they believe that it was an interference in the antenna based on the poo of the pigeons.
Oh yes, the poo of the pigeons.
Pigeons, yeah, exactly. And then of course, yeah, that is the real story.
That's the story.
Because
I thought you said pull of the pinion.
No, the poo of the pigeon.
I don't know how to the shit the shit suit of the pig.
You were better.
Yeah, and no, but that story has a real, for me at least. I address this topic quite time to time. I readdress again the topic because it's nice. Because remember that the guys was complete imbeciles working for Bell Company, and supposedly that antenna in New York was for contacting with Echo satellite in space.
Right.
You know, the first satellite hanging on balloon that supposedly inflate in the vacuum of space and never explode, you know? So because, maybe cables came along or some new technology, that antenna was don't operate anymore. So it was there and the guys without any job, nothing to do, So they start using this antenna and suddenly, oh man, we discovered the age of the universe.
Right, because that's where they confirmed the Big Bang. Because
and then
dude, and what
pigeon droppings.
NASA, of course, that was the first approach, and you can see the evolution of the way the background cosmic radiation. Because with that antenna in New York, in the Central Park, I believe it was located or something around there, it just presents this super low quality background medium radiation. And then NASA start creating satellites and they start sending COBE satellite, WARP satellite, and blah, blah, blah. And they confirm the experiment of the antenna.
And they were given the 1978 Nobel Prize.
And then they receive in 2018 the Nobel Prize, or 2019 the Nobel Prize, because they need to give authority,
Dude, you know what's crazy is I think we've speculated a long time and we've gotten the answer at this point. What they're going to do, they are going to double down on space to an extent that's mind blowing, right? Like with much more advanced fakery, CGI, lifetime,
AI.
interact, and then just the whole Space Force thing. Trump come back, the whole Space Force narrative, and they're really going to double down on it, and they're going to throw NASA aside, which we did. That was one of the predictions that we frequently made. Push it towards the private sector, it kind of helps hide some of it. Uh, as opposed to the government's allegedly, ostensibly supposed to be transparent and accessible via FOIA. You have the privacy. Although they're contracted, you can still contract to FOIA certain things, but it makes it much more complicated. Long story short, it seems like that's clearly where they're going, right? Is to really double down on space and push it with the privatization, the SpaceX, and that's evidenced by stuff like the Boeing disaster here, right? Well, you guys heard about the whole Boeing satellite disaster.
Mm-hmm. Blew up.
So yeah, and so basically, they're pushing this narrative that and Elon's saying it a lot, that they're so far advanced from any other space agency that it's not even close. Like NASA's not even remotely close to being able to do what they do, and then they spend like $40 billion but don't do anything. Blah blah blah. So it's funny because it's like now I'm thinking like, dude, do I need to change the name of Audit NASA before we really launch it back up? Like, do we need to make it just not specific?
Where do you
to
stand
NASA?
on Elon? Do you think that he is just a loose cannon? Because he says some things that you would think they don't want him saying.
I think he's just like Trump. He's allowed that's part of the plan is to let him say things to earn trust and credibility, and that's where I'm at. I don't.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I just because it seems like their whole, and I've now read this whole narrative that when Trump becomes president, he's going to name Jim Bridenstine back to the head of NASA. So we'll get rid of the 185-year-old guy, and then we'll get Jim Bridenstine back. And he says, and then they're going to switch focus back to Mars. Of course, this is I've made a movie about it fucking years ago, and just expect it every single time. The story is you bring in a new president who puts in a new director in charge of NASA, who then puts the direction back on the other thing that they're not on. So if they're talking about,
man, if they're gonna skip over the moon thing,
of course, the moon, they're already way too late. So now we'll just go to Mars. Elon.
Well, I read an article 3 days ago, at least in the Spanish media press, that they say NASA has complicated again, and we need to wait until 26, 27 to get back to the moon.
Of course, I mean, this is.
Okay, well, I came up with a good name for the new organization. I'm not going to say it out loud because people will try to buy the domain, but
they will.
We'll have to switch it. We'll have to switch it because Audit NASA doesn't work anymore. They're going to be like, yeah, NASA sucks. What about Elon?
Right. That's where all the real work's being done, of course. And there's actually, I'm trying to think, there's some channel out there that, I wonder if I can remember his name. Thunderfoot? I don't know why that sounds familiar. But he's definitely a heliocentric believer, but he does great videos just ripping into Elon. Because people think of course there's a narrative told, right? But if you actually look at what was promised by Elon Musk as far as the Starship or whatever thing, and they just caught it between the arms and the chopsticks, whatever. But all this stuff, the amount of money that has been lost in this whole enterprise that was not told to the American people that would be used, we're funding all this nonsense, and it's like they can't even do what they did in 1960 yet. He can't even put people on a craft and put it up and land it. We landed people on the freaking moon, and he can't do that.
He's been promising people their cars are going to drive them around for a decade now.
Right. And nobody even
selling it.
Musk, the beginning of the end. Yeah, this guy's really pissed at Musk, which is great. Tesla semi-delivers failure. Yeah, his name is Thunderfoot. Let me see if I can find the video I'm talking about. But people hate him because he really goes hard at promise delivery. Let me see if this is the video here. Let's listen to this for a second. Let me share my screen. Where did I go here?
Time stop. Yeah.
Taxpayer paid for this? And the answer is they paid
By the way,
$3 billion so far.
Full screen it. Yeah.
The thing is, Musk wasn't meant to be delivering a single booster catch for $3 billion. He was meant to be delivering the human landing system for $3 billion. A vehicle to take people from lunar orbit to the surface and return them back safely to lunar orbit. And when they were getting their $3 billion off the US taxpayer, this is what they submitted for their plan. And SpaceX themselves thought that catching the booster was such a trivially easy task that it wasn't even worthy of its own point on the Gantt chart, which, as we'll see later in this video, recovering the booster is the energetically easy bet. That is, SpaceX has thus far achieved none of the significant goals towards delivering the human landing system. And they were meant to be landing on the moon earlier this year, that is, early 2024. And they basically spent all of the fixed price contract money that the US taxpayer gave them.
So we gave them all this money that they were supposed to be on the moon by the end of it. And now they're out of money and they barely caught the thing that wasn't even an important milestone to put on the map. So you can't even, they're like so far behind and people are like, this guy's the smartest guy in the world.
Rather than actually just one booster catch in 2024, they should have actually been landing this thing on the moon in 2024. How are they going to do that when they've already spent all the cash that the government has given them? Actually, I tell a lie. In 2022, the government decided that they were going to give SpaceX another $1 billion for a upgraded Starship and to fly a second lunar mission. So they maybe have another $1 billion to play with, but have to actually deliver another mission to the moon. Optimistically, they've completed maybe somewhere between 0 and 2% of the contract for all of the original contract value. But rather
Smartest
than
guy
landing
ever
on the moon, the furthest it's gone is the bottom of the Indian Ocean.
Maybe somebody should ask him, well, you should look at this and just decide, should you be the CEO of 6 companies? Which doesn't even make sense. How could you be the CEO of 6 companies?
Those are the facts. What? Analyzing a problem with facts? You must have Musk derangement syndrome. Yeah, in reality, it's not so much that I'm blinded by hate, as Musk fans can't see with reason. Right. I mean, the funny thing is, if you actually take a look at the comments on any of my streams on these things, you'll find they're absolutely dominated by people who don't really make any defense of Musk. Wasting some $3 billion of taxpayer money was all worth it because they incorrectly believe that it made some guy on the internet angry. Like, the disappointment on his face.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Whoops. Hilarious. Yeah, I mean, Musk is a joke.
That guy is from England.
I think so. Is that right?
So never put him on a penny on the Elon Musk tax payer incomes. So that's why he's so happy.
Oh, is that why? Yeah, he just goes after Musk hard, which hey, I appreciate at least people, because this is what I'm talking about. Just we have to have truthful conversations. We have to have honest conversations. And if you can't do that with the other side, which is something I thought that we'd be able to do at some point, at least in the past, and Austin sometimes finds people he can talk to honestly like that. I can't find them. It's just I can only find people who want to repeat dogma and just believe in. It's like this guy told me the other day. He's like arguing with me about whether or not you could watch boats disappear and bring them back with a camera. And he's like, I go out there and I here, I'll show you pictures. I'm like, you can't show me pictures. I'm telling you that I'm saying with your eye, the boat disappears. Then you take the camera out. So you can't show me pictures. Do you understand that? That's not part of my argument. My argument isn't that you can show me a picture of a boat. And then you're like, I could see that boat. And then I could keep zooming in. It's like, no, you're talking about using a camera. I'm making the argument that in the past, they would have just used their eyes. They can't get it. They just will keep arguing with you and saying, no, but the boat eventually goes over the edge. Listen to me. I'm saying, do you lose the boat with your eyes when you're out there? Well, I can look at the camera and bring it back. Yeah, it's just like you bang your head against the wall. Eventually, you just give up. Like I can't communicate with these people because I just want honesty. Just admit, oh yeah, you're right. I guess that's not proof. If with your eyes the boat disappears and then you pull it back with the camera, and we think back to old times and like, oh, those guys didn't have cameras, so they would have thought boats disappeared with their eyes, but they didn't. They were still there. Okay, I get what you're saying, Jeran. You're right. That's not proof. Why can't we have that argument? Why can't we have that conversation? Why do we have to devolve into everybody's lying and there's no such thing and nobody's ever brought a boat back from over the edge? You heard these kind of lines, or that flat Earth can't explain a sunset? What?
Yeah, normally what happens when you make the point that's so obvious there, instead of just like easily just acknowledging it, they'll actually deflect.
Yeah,
just completely change the subject.
Yeah, it's got to always go back to these talking points. Whereas again, and then if you get one thing wrong, they make a big deal. It's like, well, there's a difference between people that are having to fight against lies and kind of spitball a little versus somebody who's proclaiming that they know the exact truth. They know what the sun is. They know what the temperatures are. Like, great Lawrence Krauss, who tells us the best evidence against the Bible is that light takes 1,000,000 years to get from the center of the sun to the corona, and therefore, how could the Earth be 6,000 years old? That's what.
Wow.
That's what he says.
Point.
That's a great point. I didn't know. The light takes 1,000,000, and we know the temperature of the sun, right? Right.
Well, this is the thing. It's just like rules for thee, not me, right? It's like they have all these definitive claims. They'll say them with so much confidence. We know exactly what the sun's made out of. We know exactly how far. But then they'll change it. Like the mainstream will change it.
Right.
And they'll be like, well, that's how science works. It's like, oh.
Right. Think of how easy that is. Think of the most easy position you could ever do. I'm just imagining it right now. Imagine that we all decide right now to believe in science. How easy is life? We don't have to do any more research. We can go watch football right now or whatever's on. We can go play sports. We can go drink beers, because if anything changes, we just say, yeah, well, that's what science does. Of course, our beliefs change. And you can argue against people that you feel are dumb. But what, you believe in the flat earth? Come on. I mean, and they know that they're always in the right because they're backed by the body of science. And if we ever prove something or they have to change something, then they're still right because they still are backed by the body of science. It's such a pussy position to take. And it's just obvious why they take it. It's because they don't, if you're afraid of ever being called out or called stupid or, be made fun of, well, then you take the science position and you just sit there the rest of your life. You don't have to do any research.
Stupid people always outnumber smart people. And throughout all history, the smartest people are always mocked and ridiculed by the stupid people.
Right. And then if you take all those people and you put them into classrooms and then you give awards or give papers that say how smart you are to the ones who are the best at regurgitating your information and then being able to teach that regurgitated information. And it just happened that the science books just came into play, 1900, Rockefeller science books. So it's not even that shocking of what's happened. It's just once we see it, now what do we do? Now how do we get it back? Because this is what they're just teaching lies. And now it's even gotten worse. Everybody coming out of college is a extreme leftist who has the most insane views that don't even make any sense. They don't jive with anything. They're just men can play in women's sports and who cares about records. And it's just gotten disgusting. You got people out there demanding that they get to kill their babies. We demand to kill our babies right now. We're going to kill our babies right now. It's like, guys, come on. We have to be smarter than this. And it doesn't seem like we are anymore. People have lost that ability. And I think it's just because people are afraid of being called out, right? This happened in school. If you question gravity in school, what happened? The whole class laughed at you when the teacher said, of course, what do you mean? How do things fall? And you just got shamed. And so you quickly learned that in this world, we only say the things that the teacher says and that we're taught. And we repeat those things and we're given high fives. And if you try and question anything, you'll get laughed at by the classroom. And that just teaches you to be in compliance. And it's sad because some of the best thinkers were the class clowns, right? The ones that would think outside the box. That's what you need. We need students thinking about ways to drive automobiles other than gasoline. But if they teach you that, if you tried to say, well, couldn't we ride a car on water? They'd be like, laugh at you. Oh, I guess it's just gas. It's the only thing that works. You're pigeonholing every single person into a certain type. And that's what we have now. Everybody, it's cookie cutter. Nobody thinks outside the box. Nobody's got fresh thoughts. And if you do, you'll get made fun of and shut down. How dare you? Can't have different ideas. Is it 3?
Yeah.
Is it 4?
Yeah, we got to go.
What the hell happened?
Well, we started a little late, 3:45.
Oh, I get it.
All right. But yeah, let's wrap it up. Okay. Let's go with what you guys got coming up this week. So we'll start with Iru likes to go first. Iru, what's going on? What you got coming on this week?
All right, I start first, and that is very, very okay. What I come out this week? Well, I just in a big channel of a Spanish community, they premiere discussion that I have in that channel talking about flat Earth. So I hope you reach like another videos of that channel before like 1 million views. So we keep spreading the words. And then I just make my usual stuff in my website, Spanish community, and my YouTube channel. I already active doing live streams almost every day. And I have prepared, but we can share next week this discussion about the moon landing and the presentation of the lunar rover as a proof, because the dust follow the path of the supposedly 1/6 gravity of the moon, blah blah blah. And if you want to support me, everybody, that wants to support me on Patreon, I giving my full PowerPoint presentation as in exchange. So I really appreciate it. And the rest, as always, keep doing what I love.
Nice, very cool. Yeah, I'm interested in seeing what you had to say about that for sure. All right, my boy Zach from Good Times for All. What you got coming up this week, brother?
Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, as usual, you can catch me over at Iron Rail Media at 5 a.m. Eastern to 7 a.m. or over at freeworld.fm. And then Thursday night, we'll be having our GLOBEBUSTERS Tech. Our last two shows were on blood types and the difference between Rh positive and Rh negative. They were awesome, and I can't believe they're still up. Usually those shows get taken down. We'll see how long they last, but if you want to check them out, I'd go check it out sooner than later, because it seems like every show Cami talks about blood types eventually just gets taken down. We've had them just removed without them even like giving us a community guideline or a strike or anything. Just bloop, we go in there one day and it's gone. Weird.
Yeah, they gave me a copyright on the other day for my piece on One World Orbit, which is just hilarious because it's just another one of those fabrications. And I tried getting a hold of those people to ask for their live stream. You know what their final answer was? We lost it. One final orbit. They're orbiting around the Earth for the final time. They're doing all they've got a DVD out and everything, and it was live streamed, but they don't have the live stream. They lost it. So, it always happens that way. That whenever I try and inquire something or why, we lost it. Oh, we can't provide you with full 24-hour cameras because because we don't return dark images. And it's like, well, dark, it's not supposed to be nighttime there. What do you mean? It should be 24-hour sun. Oh, you got to talk to your government. That's what the email says. So just when you get stuff like that, like how many times does this have to happen to where you're like, isn't there ever going to be, how can I predict all these things? Like when that girl, Ross and Carrie, from the podcast told me, she goes, I have astronaut friends. I can work something out with them if you want. I'm like, well, what do you mean? She goes, well, what would you want to do with an astronaut? I said, let me talk to an astronaut that's on the ISS. She goes, I could see that. I'm like, look, me. I would keep my cool. I wouldn't be rude or anything. I said, just let me have a 20-minute conversation with them. I said, in that 20 minutes, I could verify that they're actually in space. She goes, okay, I'll ask them. And then came back the next day. She goes, yeah, I mean, you and I are going to have different ideas about why, but they said no. I'm like, yeah, you and I have very different ideas about why. They can't. They
don't find it odd at all.
Well, they must, but it's like they got to talk to children with pre-known questions that the astronauts already been given. We can't have them talk to you, and you actually ask them to go over to the window. Guys, I keep saying this, and nobody's ever been able to disprove me. Find one time in 21 years that an astronaut has gone from the space station to a window at night and showed us the night side of Earth. That's all I'm asking for. One time, one astronaut, show me outside the ISS, the Earth at night. Why would that never have happened? I wonder why. Not once. But again, people want to believe what they want to believe, and they want to think that's just normal. I mean, all the Globers will make excuses. Rather than go look for it and inquire, how would that ever be possible? They immediately default to, well, Jeran's just an idiot. There must be a reason, and I'm not even going to look for it. It's just stupid that he even brings that up. What are you saying? It's all fake? Every science and preacher and every scientist and every preacher, a teacher is faking it, or what? They're all lying. It's just crazy. They can't.
Dude, make a list of the things like that, and I'll throw them in the next time I speak at a city council meeting about NASA.
Okay.
I'll be like, and there are simple things that can be done that have never been done, and I'll just list them off.
Yeah, they've never done it. So yeah, for me, coming up this week, we've got Wednesday, the Reefer Roulette show, and I believe this coming Thursday. Oops, what is Thursday? What day of the week is that? The first, or is it the following week? Let me check my calendar. I just got to make sure if that's the first Thursday of the month or not. If it is, we got Speaker's Corner. If not, it's the following one. Thursday is the 31st. So I lied. Speaker's Corner will be the following week. So no Thursday show, but I do have a couple interviews this week that I'm on, but I think they're all taped shows, and I'll let you guys know. To follow, go to t.me/jeranism show, and that's where I update all the notifications when I go live. And so that group's growing good. I think there's 1,400 or something in there. And turn the notifications on, because the only time I post there is to tell you when I'm going live. So that's about it. And then my wife has been loading some stuff that's on my hard drive that's not on my channel. So she's been loading a video a day. So a couple people have had questions of why I chose certain videos. I said, I'm not the one choosing it. My wife's just kind of choosing them and putting them up there. So yell at her if you want. That's it.
Nice. All right. Couple things I'll say. So hopefully it finalizes, but it looks like I'll be on a really, 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 really big platform debating flat Earth in person. And so we need someone, preferably PhD astronomer, astrophysicist, or physicist, that would be willing to debate. And ideally, we need 2 people for a 2v2, but at the least 1. But really big. Anyone in the community that can help. So if you know someone that works at NASA, aerospace engineer, astrophysicist, professor, whatever, that would be willing to go in person on a big platform, big podcast, and have a debate. About 2-hour show. Have a conversation about geocentrism and flat Earth, etc. Let me know or reach out to them, ask them, help link me with them, give me a list of people you maybe know. Trying to get that done sooner than later. I've had a few people that I thought I was going to be able to get that are being lame. So, yeah, need to figure that out very quickly. You guys will know more soon, and pretty epic, very big. And this week I am gonna come back with the regular streams. So I'm starting a new geocentrism series, and then we're bringing back School and Globers. I'm just gonna call it season 2, whatever. And what I'll start doing is having my streams set up like far in advance. So you'll be able to go to my channel and be like, okay, Monday at 8 p.m. or whatever, right? Monday at 9 p.m., Wednesday at 9 p.m. You'll be able to see what shows are coming up, and then I'll upload a bunch of speeches and stuff I've given. And I was on Stu Peters recently. I'm uploading. So lots of content about to get uploaded on my channels, and we'll start back with the series. So yeah, should be cool. So stay tuned for that. And really an easy way to kind of keep up with what's going on about a week in advance is I'm planning on having all the streams already kind of set up days in advance. So there's that. Should be cool. We're gonna start back from step 1 and explain geocentrism and bring back School and Glover. So. All right. I think
Nice.
that's it. Yeah. Trying to set up a really big Kamala Trump debate I run on MDD, but I think
Oh,
people are
nice.
back. People are backing out. So cool, man. Anything else?
Not that I can think of.
All right, cool. Well, be kind to each other. Don't lie to each other. Open your mind because there's truth. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Justin Johnson, for the $5 or the 5 memberships that you gifted on YouTube. That was all the donations. Guys, do better. No, I'm just kidding. If you donate, we'll try to remember to call you out the next week. All right. Be kind to each other. Don't lie to each other. Open your mind because there's truth inside. Peace.
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 Peace.